Everybody, welcome to the City Planning Committee meeting of the 6th of September. With me we have Alderman Zuko, Lord Mayor, Councillor Basalt, Councillor Lohberger, Alderman Bloomfield, Councillor Kelly, Councillor Dudder, Councillor Harvey and the Deputy Lord Mayor and myself. Can I ask that somebody move... do we have any apologies? Do we have any apologies? No? Okay. Can I ask somebody to move the minutes from the previous meeting? Alderman Bloomfield, all those in favour say aye. Aye. Against say no. That's carried. Consideration of supplementary items. Do we have any? No. Indications of pecuniary and conflicts of interest. Are there any? Oh, very good. Transfer of agenda items. Planning authority items, consideration of items of deputations. So Deputy, all those in favour say aye. Aye. Against say no. That is carried, and the committee is now acting as a planning authority. And the first item we have is item 6.1.1, significant tree amendment. We have two deputations. The first one is a Mr. Emmanuel Dallas. Mr. Dallas, if you just want to come up to that table just in front of you. Put one of those microphones up as close as you're able to. You'll have 5 minutes to speak. I'll give you a warning when there's 30 seconds left, and then we will most likely have some questions for you.
It's neither the mic, I think.
They're all about the same.
About the same length, are they?
Yeah.
Speak up a bit.
You're ready.
Yeah, I'm... well, a bit of background. I'd like to start by giving a bit of background as to the location of our property and the willow tree and our reasons for objecting against the listing of the tree. This is the tree at 38 Bowden Street. Well, our property is 460 Macquarie Street. It has two boundaries with the Bowden Street property, and both of these properties are within 4 metres of the trunk of the willow tree. You're probably aware that a willow tree is a pretty large canopy, and we have two boundary walls, which are effectively two large block walls, and the tree actually overhangs the boundary by 3 to 5 metres. Now we have box gutters on 2 of those sides, so we in the past have had a lot of problem with trees and leaves blocking gutters. We've had issues with flooding. We've had, loss of rent from tenants who weren't able to occupy the premises for a period of time, all due to the fact that the overhanging branches actually go into the gutter. They don't hang over the gutter, they actually are in the gutter, and we have to, the only way we can access the gutter is actually to cut back the trees. Now, in the past, we've had the Neighbourhoods Dispute About Plants Act to rely on, which is an Act of Parliament, which gives us a clear right of handling disputes with neighbours and trees. So, and that actually applies not only to overhanging branches, but light, by also for trees that have grown excessively, that the neighbours have a right to ask the owner of the tree to cut it back. Now, I'm very concerned that if we have this tree listed, then we will lose our rights to be able to even trim this tree back. Now, the response in the report says that obviously we were able to trim the tree back significantly in 2022. And the report says it is expected that the tree will recover to form an aesthetic and appealing form of the original tree. Now, for that I read that we'll now have to put up with this tree growing 3 to 5 metres in our property. So that's obviously one major concern of us, because it's a commercial property and we don't want to, have trouble with our tenants. Just a couple of other very quick things, I'm running out of time, but regarding the actual tree species, the Salix babylonica, in ACT, New South Wales, Queensland and WA, it is a registered environmental weed. The University of Tasmania website also lists this tree as a serious environmental weed. So a weed Environmental weed means that it threatens bushland and native species. I think that's a point we need to make, that this tree is effectively a weed. Every year this tree basically, has seeds, and those seeds are then blown in the air and go into bushland. They also can obviously go through our gutters, into downpipes and into the Hobart rivulet. So again, being an environmental weed, I don't think listing of this tree is really appropriate. The other really important thing is the age of the tree. Now, I don't know who put this figure in, but there's a figure in the report of the tree being 178 years old, a willow tree. Now, my investigations with speaking to a couple of horticulturists is that the lifespan of Salix babylonica is between 50 and 75 years. So it's pretty amazing that this tree is anywhere near that age. So again, back to the criteria of our building. Our building was built and factually built in 1955, 68 years ago. So the dilemma is, was the tree planted after us or before?
30 seconds left, if you
How
want.
much?
30 seconds.
30, okay, right. Also, I've made there's some notes in there that the tree is remarkable and the finest specimen in Tasmania from someone at the Royal Botanical Gardens. Just a point that the Royal Botanical Gardens do not have one specimen of Salix babylonica. So anyone who appears to be an expert from the Hobart, from the Royal Botanical Gardens, should actually be able to have some experience. In fact, they have none because they don't have any trees. So the criteria of aesthetic significance, all those things, it's a suburban block, it's bordered on two boundaries with block walls. In a greenfield site, well, I may agree with it, but where it is and where it's located and the nuisance it causes down the track, and the fact that we'll probably have to forego our rights under the Neighbourhood Disputes and Plants Act, I don't think it's appropriate.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Deputy Lord Mayor.
You, Chair. Did you read the responses to your concerns in relation, like in the report? So it's.
I have read them, yeah.
Yeah, page 19. I think like it's talking about this actually not being a noxious weed.
I didn't say it was. The word is environmental weed. It's a different thing altogether.
Oh, okay.
It's classified as environmental weed, which I specified as being invasive to natural plants and habitat.
And just a follow-up question: are you aware that these have been considered by people who work in this field?
Well, is there a report here? I haven't seen anyone with their signature or their name onto it. These are just notes, as far as I can see.
Yeah, so you haven't read the report?
Well, this is all I've got is what's in the actual minutes here.
Right, thank you.
Any other questions? Lord Mayor.
So can you envisage a way that you could sort of, if you could be reassured that you could manage it and trim it and those sort of things, that you could live with it?
Sure. Well, as long as my rights are protected under the Act of Parliament, I'll be happy.
Yeah,
I need to trim the tree back to my boundary. Otherwise I can't even access the gutters. You can imagine, your boundary here and the tree 5 metres into your property.
Yeah.
How do we deal with that if this tree's listed?
So it would just be the leaves, though. You'd just be trimming.
Branches.
Oh, you'd be trimming branches.
It's a willow. The trees don't go up; they go around and over. So they're actually heading south, landing on the roof of our property. So a standard tree, the leaves will grow out. This grows down. It's weeping willow.
Oh.
So all it does is grow into the gutters, under the roof. If I can't, I need to be able to trim the tree back.
Sure. But if you could be reassured that you could trim the tree back, you'd be open to it.
Yeah.
Councillor Lohberger.
Just through you to the appropriate staff member.
Oh, we might do questions to start. We'll get to that. We'll do the deputations first. I've got a question just on Mr. Dallas, on page 18 of the report. There's a dot point on the left saying that the root system's already caused damage to the boundary wall. Is that your?
That's our boundary wall. Yes.
So can you speak to that a bit more? 'Cause
Yeah,
I know
well,
we're talking about the trimming of the leaves, but if the roots are causing
Yeah, the
damage as
roots,
well.
yeah. In
not
a
the-
recent development 2 years ago, we had an old service station. We inherited the big yard at the back, and in our excavations, we found that the external walls had cracked significantly. There's actually a ivy tree planted on the neighbour's property as well, which was growing through the walls of the building. Also, the willow tree has quite an invasive root system, and we basically had to dig out the entire, probably 60, 70 cubic metres of earth to actually compact it with rock and build the level of the slab up to original height. So it settled by at least 150 millimetres. So we've now since repaired that, but this tree will continue to grow and continue to, be invasive. How can we protect our property? It's within 4 metres of our boundary, and the canopy of these things can be 10 or 12 metres high, diameter.
Thank you.
And the root system can pass, 10 or 12 metres under our property.
Was there another question from the Lord Mayor?
Oh, just to clarify, so most of the trunk is not on your property though, is it?
No, the trunk is within 4 metres.
Okay.
So from the centre of the trunk to the walls on 2 sides, it's within 4 metres.
Right.
And we have, 4 metre high walls on 2 sides. So, it's a suburban block, it's a large tree, and to say that it's it's very questionable on the age of the tree as well. I mean, someone can say 170 years, but how do we determine it? And, we need to be, to protect our property. If we're in the position down the track where this is listed and my rights are gone, what am I supposed to do? We need to be able to trim the tree back to the boundary. I mean, surely that's not unwarranted in this day and age, especially with a willow tree where the trees hang down. They don't grow up, they grow down.
Any further questions? No. Thank you, Mr. Dallas. If you want to return to your seat, we'll move on. The next deputation is Mr. David Hulse Rogers on behalf of the South Hobart Progress Association. As per the last speaker, if you'd like to just make your way to the table at the front, and you'll have 5 minutes to speak. I'll give you a warning when there's 30 seconds left, and then I'm sure we'll have some questions for you whenever you're ready.
Is that enough? You can hear?
Nice and loud.
Ah, right. I'm the Honorary Secretary of the South Hobart Progress Association, and the association has, over many years, put in nominations for significant trees in the South Hobart area and the general Hobart municipality. This one we didn't nominate initially, but we know that it's a tree that is significantly respected by the community. I don't know whether you've received copies of the letters that have been written to the CEO, the previous CEO,
Yep.
Kelly Grigsby, and also to Mr. Neil Noy. Basically, the information that we want to put before council is basically what's in those communications. The tree is of historical importance to the property on which it's located. Whether the age is 175 years or not, it probably predates the cottage on which the tree is located. The cottage is a heritage listed cottage with the Tasmanian Heritage on the Heritage Register, and the curtilage to heritage properties is an important factor in retaining the properties in a way that can be understood by people in the future. So the tree is of significance in that regard. Basically, it's a large tree. It's got a 4 metre girth, which suggests that it's significantly aged. gather that Sustainable Tasmania Timber recently has had a bit of problem cutting down trees with large girths, and this tree obviously has been there for a long, long time. It's an example of a property and of a planting that probably went along with the industrial use of the site, because it's been used for a Smithy's house, and the aesthetics of the tree are probably the most important aspect that the community is concerned about. It's a very visible tree, and it's very unusual in a residential garden. We're usually on parklands and down rivulets and things like that. There is not another one that we know of in South Hobart. So we would consider that the tree is an important aspect of the suburb and the property on which it's based.
Okay, are there any questions?
So, thanks for your deputation. Just so that community value is what you're talking about?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Further questions? Councillor Dutta.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much for your deputation. Just a question with regards to the fact that the rights is going to be removed if we go ahead with this. How would you respond to that?
Well, I could understand the property owner's concerns, but I suppose you've got to decide whether the tree has been there longer than the buildings. He has suggested that the building has been there longer than the tree, but it's very hard to say, and unless we get an arboricultural expert in to give us a decent idea of what the age of the tree is, that's sort of a moot point. I think it's a bit of caveat emptor. If you buy a property and there are things around it, you need to.
Any further questions? Just quickly, one from myself. Just on the caveat emptor comment, would you? I suppose that applies when somebody buys something, not considering the nature of a property or the what exists on the property at a time. Would you still think that applies, given that we're talking about the property owner who's bought a property, and now we're talking about adding further rules or restrictions onto maintenance of that property after the fact?
I'm not sure that I'd be willing to make a sort of a comment on that. I mean, I noticed that, council has gone down the track of nominating this tree, part of its significant tree listing, and for it to now become a moot point whether it can now go ahead and be finally listed or not, I think is a bit reprehensible, and I think really council should have stuck up for its original decision that must have been made by one of the planners.
Right. Any other questions? No. Thank you. If you want to take your seat.
I do have one.
Oh,
Just
Councillor Harvey.
so the tree's been pruned in the past.
Yes.
Would you have objections to it being pruned if it was able to be pruned?
Well, it has been. It's been almost vandalised a couple of times, and the tree recovers. So I don't see any problem with having it, the tree trimmed back to the boundary.
All right, thank you.
I'd like to return to your seat. I'll open the item. I will note that we do have Mr. Noy here and his team, so if they'd like to come up to the table in case people have questions. I see the deputy with a hand up. Oh.
Oh, you can do that?
Oh, no, you go.
Lord Mayor?
Well, I was just going to move the item to start with.
So
I'll
we've got,
second it.
oh, don't need a seconder in
Oh,
committee.
don't.
Councillor Harvey?
Could I just get a clarification on the right to trim the tree in order to access the gutters or, you know, maintain the gutters or the eaves or whatever through you?
That'll be one for Mr. Noy's team. Who's best to answer?
Exemption within, through you, Chair, there is an exemption within the significant tree code that says the pruning of a tree to improve its health or appearance, provided its normal growth habit is not retarded, that's exempt. So you can certainly do, and we encourage people to maintain and look after their trees when they're on the significant tree register, to prevent any maintenance on significant trees.
And does that include, sorry, through you, Chair, does that include the neighbours also pruning the tree?
Through you, Chair, it's not specific to say who can and can't prune. So as long as they met that exemption, and they would be welcome to contact us to confirm whether what they were planning to do would meet that criteria. It doesn't say it has to be done by the owner.
Just add that it's not unreasonable for an adjacent property owner to lop at their boundary to maintain their property. It's common law right under normal circumstances to trim to your property boundary, but taking into account not compromising those qualities of the tree.
Just a question for myself, just off the back of that. That exemption was pruning for a particular purpose, was it? It was to maintain the health of the tree. Would pruning for the purpose of maintaining, the property of an adjacent property and preventing branches and leaves and such falling into that property be covered by that same exemption?
So it's health or appearance provided its normal growth habit is not retarded. So it's all of those things in combination. I would say you could prune back to maintain its shape away from the neighbouring property.
Okay. Councillor Basalt?
Chair, can we get clarity on the status of a weed? I've just sat here and done a basic Google, and it is listed as a weed in most states in Australia, largely due to hybridising with noxious weeds. Is that, what's your view on that?
Yeah, so through you, Chair, and if you're happy for me to take this now. So we had both our environmental planner as well as our stormwater environmental engineer look at this, and their advice is that so it's all weeds are some form of, all willows have some weed risk, but with Salix babylonica in particular, it's much reduced, and it's not considered a declared weed, so there's no obligation to remove it, and it's not considered a weed of national significance. If I may also add, we have existing weeping willows on the register already, and there is at least one weeping willow that's on the National Trust Register. So it is considered that it does have values in those important tree registers, even if it is, some people may consider it a weed.
Follow-up question through you, Chair. So a UTAS article here says that it's considered a major environmental weed in Tasmania. Is that the correct classification?
Major environmental weed doesn't have any statutory category, so it's not a listed or declared weed.
One further, and it does have the potential to hybridise with the noxious ones and spread along the rivulet. Is that correct?
Our environmental scientists looked at what the risk of that was, and because of its location far from the rivulet, they determined that it wasn't.
That it was low risk?
That it was low risk.
But possible. Thank you.
Now, I said Lord Mayor, but I think I've passed over Councillor Lohberger.
Already been asked.
Oh, it's already been asked. Now, Lord Mayor.
Can I just clarify who nominated the tree?
Through you, Chair, the owner of the property.
Okay. So, so the owner of the property is really keen to see it listed, even though they haven't given a deputation. Oh, they're there in the...
I've never been to a town hall meeting before, and I'm nervous
Look, well,
to speak in public. I didn't know I had to book a time to speak, so I'm new to all this. But it's my tree. My building is 145. It was built in 1845. It's 178 years old. My house. I think the tree was there planted when the house was built.
Look, sorry. Okay, sorry. Yeah, sorry. We don't have comment from the gallery, but I appreciate
But
your
it's good to
your interest in
clarify
that. Yes.
Yeah, it has come from the owner, and the owner has their own rights to look after their tree, I guess, and protect it into the future.
Any further questions, Councillor Dudder?
Sorry, I just wanted to clarify about this. The little bit of information we have suggests that there's someone from the Botanic Gardens and others think it has got some significant age, but the representative was saying how these trees don't live beyond 70 to 100 years. Can anyone clarify that?
Yeah, so I would say trees don't have use-by dates. You know, those approximations of 50 to 75 or 100 years, they're a best guess. It's very dependent on the conditions and the climate. There's no register of how long trees live for, and certainly this tree in particular is more than 4 metres in circumference, which is 1.5 metres in diameter. So it's the largest weeping willow that I know of. So I'd say its size and its location is not inconsistent with that assumption, and I'd be comfortable saying that it was planted in the 1800s, certainly.
Councillor Basalt.
Thank you, through you, Chair. So just to clarify on the age criteria for the significant trees register, why is the age of a tree considered important? What's the cut-off? Is there a cut-off, and what's the cut-off for a minimum? And why are significant gums that are at the foothills of the mountain that are 300 or 400 years not listed in this way currently?
The listing, through your Chair, the listing process is through nomination. In terms of the categories, look, they take into account the heritage aspects of the tree as well, and how that might present the property. So that is a major consideration that the panel look at. So they have a heritage member of that panel looking at that. Other aspects of it, obviously its appearance, its established kind of character. Look, Rui might be able to talk a bit more about the age and whether it presents as a good example of trees and why that also makes them significant.
Yeah, so I guess I'd just add that the 300, 400-year-old gum trees, it's not that they wouldn't meet that criteria at all, it's just that they haven't happened to have been nominated and assessed by the panel.
Yeah, and in relation to that example, they generally are covered with other broader landscape protection and ownership protection measures. So specific nomination of 10,000 of those examples would not serve any real meaningful purpose, whereas individual trees located on private sites in particular, or even on public sites, are more appropriately nominated as part of that register.
Any further questions? Councillor Dudder.
Thank you. I'm just seeking clarification from the officers. Is it possible to condition this to say that it is the right of the neighbour to trim, or is that already provided for under the legislation under the exceptional clause, whichever was stated earlier?
Mr. Noy?
Yeah, look, I don't think it's appropriate necessarily to include that within the specific listing per se, but we can certainly have that conversation with the representative around what would the appropriate trimming arrangements be for this specific this specific tree. I think we can come to a position on that.
Thank you.
Councillor Kelly.
Through you, Chair, to the officer, I'm just getting a little bit confused with this Salix babylonica situation being an environmental weed or not. And is there any reason why 4 other states in the ACT would have it listed as that and not us? I mean, it's not a big deal, this whole thing. I mean, they seem to be saying it is, and just by the pure definition of what I read on environmental weeds, you know, it does seem to be a threat to quite a few things. Getting back to my question, is there any reason why they seem to list it and we're about the only state that doesn't?
I couldn't really through you, Chair. I couldn't comment on our listing process and why we haven't. We do have weeping willows along the Hobart rivulet, and they don't appear to be spreading. What is the critical weed along the Hobart rivulet in terms of willows is Salix fragilis or crack willow, and that's because small parts snap off and then get lodged in the bank and grow profusely, whereas weeping willows don't have that same tendency. So crack willow, it's in the name. Weeping willow it doesn't have that tendency to spread along waterways the same way. And in terms of why Tasmania doesn't have it, I couldn't really comment on that. It could be something to do with the environmental conditions. Yeah, it's not my field of expertise, that one.
Deputy Lord Mayor.
I haven't got any questions. I'd just like to make comment, if I may. Thanks, Chair. Look, I appreciate the work that has gone into this report. It's comprehensive, and it comprehensively answers some of the questions and the representations that have been provided. We go through this exercise every few years, and I am just very pleased to see the listings that we do have and the nominations, and also really pleased that we've heard from a community group who recognise the value to their neighbourhood in relation to such trees, and this particular tree that we're talking at 28 Denison Street. I'd also really like to commend the owner or the custodian of this tree. These are really important things that really add value to our city and the health of our city. So I wholeheartedly support this report.
Any other comment? Councillor Basalt.
Sure, I'll make some comment. Thank you, Chair. I'm pretty concerned. I 100% value street trees generally in our environment, and the great place I have a magnificent gum in my backyard that I'd be terrified and be in tears if it ever got chopped down. But I'm a little bit concerned about the classification, the classification as a weed in other states of Australia, knowing that Tasmanian legislation has a history of failing to keep up with modern standards. The fact that it does hybridise with noxious weeds, even though it's considered low risk, we're actively spending money, ratepayer money at the moment, removing willows from the banks of the rivulet, which is only 200 metres away. And while the risk may be low, the risk is still present that it may hybridise and cause further outbreaks along the rivulet of noxious willows. I mean, more broadly, I'm not convinced in the argument that we should be listing. I mean, there's an argument one way that we should be listing trees that are non-native, and there's an alternative argument that could be prosecuted about listing only native trees, particularly ones that have some question mark over their status as a weed in other areas. With that in mind, I feel like I don't have enough information to convince me that this is a good tree to keep on the significant tree register, for concern purely that it's a noxious, it's a foreign species that may be considered a weed, and it may just be that our legislation is not up to date compared to the other states, given that 4 other states list this as a weed. So I can't support it being added to the list for this specific tree, I'm afraid.
Councillor Harvey.
Chair, it looks like this tree potentially is, according to one of the specialists from the Botanical Gardens, suggests it could be between 175, 200 years old. And I do get the point that it's a weed it's seen as a weed in some states, but you'd think that something that's been around for 200 years, or potentially 200 years, would have established itself well as a weed by now, and we're not seeing these particular types of willows all over the place. Whereas the crack willow, for example, you see that everywhere along the rivulet. Every time a branch, as was suggested earlier by the officers, every time a branch breaks off, it lodges in the rocks in the rivulet, and it's a constant hassle to have them there because you've got to remove them, and if you don't get them out quick enough, they start rooting, and we end up with the weed mat. So they're obviously terrible weed, whereas this particular tree, and I hate weeds, it's my passion to take out weeds. I don't see this as a weed in Hobart, because if it was, you would see them all over the place, and you'd see a river lined with this particular sort of willow. So I don't agree with your comments, Alderman Basalt. I just think this particular species here in Hobart, in this setting, has not proved to be a problem. It hasn't proved to be a problem along the rivulet because we don't see them everywhere, and the ones that do exist on the rivulet have been planted. And around those trees, there's no indication or signs that it is spreading in the way that a weed would, such as the crack willows. So I have no hesitation in keeping this tree, even though in some places it might be perceived or considered as a weed species. But here in Hobart, it's not, and here on the rivulet, it's not. Otherwise, we'd know all about it because it's been here for 175 to 200 years. So it clearly would have established itself in other parts without our efforts to plant a few of them along the rivulet, which I wouldn't be planting anymore, but I don't support the notion that it is a terrible weed in the setting it's in.
Councillor Benfield.
I'm just interested in the fact that when we talk about being able to trim or lop this tree, we have to maintain its lines, its beauty and things like that. But we're not really discussing the ability for this tree to fit in with where it is, which is amongst homes. We're not discussing the fact that that having a tree that happily will fill and block drains and so forth and create trouble going forwards should also be an issue. I also find that the ability to lock the tree significantly enough to ensure that it doesn't block drains, to ensure that it actually fits in with the local community and other buildings won't be able to occur if it is listed. And I note too that we're not actually arguing about this tree being physically removed, we're simply arguing about it being listed. But then if we do, the neighbours will have issues with their roofing and their roof plumbing and things like that. So if there was a way that we could confirm that the amount of lopping required to ensure that other people's homes will be satisfactorily maintained would be great, but I actually don't think the definition is going to allow the neighbours to do that. And I think that the discussion we've had to date is confirming that. We can do some lopping, but not enough to actually maintain the roof plumbing and so forth. So I would be unhappy in approving this listing.
I've got Alderman Zuko and then the Lord Mayor.
A couple of questions through you to Mr. Noy. Who could, which property owner could actually have the tree removed?
Well, clearly
under law.
The owner.
The owner. So the owner is the only person that can have the tree removed.
As it currently stands.
Okay, as it currently stands. Any neighbouring owner on any property, on any tree, can only trim the tree to the boundary fence under current legislation, correct?
That's correct.
So what do we need to list the tree for? If the owner of the property wants to protect the tree, they don't cut it down. there's no need to list the tree because the property owner is the person that wants to protect their own tree. They're not going to cut their own tree down. What's happening here is they're denying the right of a neighbour to ensure that the neighbouring tree doesn't damage the property next door under current law. Now, I think if we're going down the track, and I'll let everybody know I voted against the listings of trees in North Hobart and other because they are going to soon further create more damage to property, irrespective of all the work we've just done down there. Now, if we're going to create and list trees, we've got to ensure that where they're listed doesn't create problems for neighbouring owners. So I cannot support this because currently the legislation protects the owner as it is because they own the tree. They are the only people that can remove that tree. But the neighbouring owner should not have their rights taken away for trimming the tree to their boundary fence. Simple as that.
I've got the Lord Mayor and then Councillor Harvey.
Mr. Noy, the Neighbourhood Disputes About Plants Act. Can you explain what powers that allows?
Look, I'd be reluctant to comment on that unless one of the officers are able to.
Yeah, okay. So the Neighbourhood Disputes About Plants Act is a framework that is in place to help resolve disputes between neighbours about trees. It outlines responsibilities and rights as well. So in terms of the interaction with the Significant Tree Register, they operate at the same time. One doesn't sort of mean that the other one can't work. So there is a branch removal notice that an owner of a neighbouring property can issue to an owner of a tree saying, I need you to remove your branches. And as long as that's consistent with the exemption in the Significant Trees Code, that wouldn't be an issue. That would still operate as normal.
Can I just seek clarification though? Is it possible that you can seek an order to have a tree on a neighbouring property removed if you can prove to the tribunal that it is causing you a nuisance?
So you can go through a tribunal, and I believe that is one of the outcomes that could happen, that could occur. So
the advice that Mr. Noy gave Alderman Zuko, that there is no way that a tree can be removed from a private property, is not right, I understand, because the Neighbourhood Disputes About Plants Act actually gives power to a neighbour to go to the tribunal, make the case that a tree is a nuisance and have an order for it to be removed. And I understand this has happened on a number of occasions.
Yeah, you're right, under certain circumstances.
Yeah, under certain circumstances.
Yeah. But whether that would apply in this instance is...
I know, but the question was, can anybody remove a tree other than the owner? And the answer was no. Well, actually the answer is yes. Under this very powerful act, State Parliament Act, the Neighbourhood Disputes About Plants Act, which was controversial at the time because it certainly does give the power of someone who can make a really strong case to the tribunal to remove a tree, which is the asset of on another piece of land. So I think it's really important to understand that actually this landowner is protecting her private property rights. Now, around this table, I often hear people, champions of private property, talking about, you can't tell me what to do on my property. Well, this property owner wants to protect her tree for future generations, for selling it into the future, so that it can't be taken out under this Neighbourhood Disputes Act. And I think we should respect that private property right. So I think that's actually the most important thing. The other thing is that every bit of advice you've been given is that this isn't actually, our environmental planner has said this isn't an environmental problem, so you don't need to worry about the environmental impact. And as far as I'm aware, there has been no information, no evidence presented that there's any problem with plumbing or any evidence. There's just a sort of, you know, a passing comment. Again, we can't take away someone's private property rights that they want to list this tree on the basis of hearsay. Hearsay that there might be a plumbing issue, there might be this, you know, this is a really serious, the owner wants to do this. We've been advised that it's not an environmental problem, and lopping is allowed on the other side for basic maintenance to sort of support it. So, you know, I think the reasonable response is to allow the owner to do what they want on their land, based on the professional advice we've had that, you know, this won't cause an environmental nuisance and it can coexist with owners having the rights to lop and manage to a certain extent on their land.
Okay, I've got a few speakers lined up. I've got Councillor Harvey, Alderman Zuko, Councillor Dutta. Before I go to Councillor Harvey, just a question off the back of that. We've spoken a bit about the rights to trim overhanging branches off as far as the rights of the neighbouring property owners. As far as talking about roots that potentially could be damaging walls or structures, does the owner of an adjacent property have the right to cut roots that are potentially or are in fact damaging infrastructure or property?
Mm-hmm.
If the tree is listed as significant?
Under the Neighbourhood Disputes About Plants Act, you mean?
I suppose under the prevailing laws of the day, if this tree was to be listed as a significant tree.
I understand under the Neighbourhood Disputes About Plants Act you can grow roots as well as branches. In terms of the significant tree listing, it would again be that we would take the pruning of roots and branches to be considered under the same exemption criteria. So if it was going to significantly affect the health of the tree, if you were going to remove too many roots that it would die, then that wouldn't be considered exempt.
So just as a follow-on from that, if a root was significantly damaging a wall, or let's say an actual residence itself, and was lifting the wall or damaging infrastructure of a dwelling, but the cutting of that root would damage the health of the tree, what would the outcome of that be under the significant tree rules?
So, just to, in the event that a assessment of the tree didn't meet the exemption, so then it would go through a planning application process. So I think it's important to realise that the exemption is one part of that code, and so it's going to really allow for a more detailed assessment of trimming. So, for example, there might be some small elements of trimming maintenance that might meet that exemption for a number of properties, but if they need to go further and it's not clear from the information provided that it's going to meet that level of exemption, then it goes through the assessment process. So it'll go through a detailed assessment, including arboriculturalist report. So that would look at ways to deal with it, and it would go through that planning application. So that might be a solution to deal with more comprehensive trimming and lopping and that kind of thing that wouldn't just necessarily meet that exemption, but obviously there would be a cost associated with that.
And so in that, and that was going to be my next question. In that instance, if a tree on a property, a tree adjacent to a property owner's property was damaging infrastructure on their property, and they needed to submit a development application to meaningfully remove roots that were damaging property, the financial onus would be on that property owner.
That would probably need to be arranged between the two properties, and I think that would probably be something that would come out through the neighbourhood disputes legislation. You might have dealt with that, Ruby, whether that's something that's kind of comes out of that process. And
certainly a mediation is part of that process, so bringing the two parties together and coming to an agreement.
Okay. Look, I've got more questions, but I'm happy to let the debate continue. So, Councillor Harvey.
Yeah, thanks. Look, I'm moving on from this particular tree. I'm happy to support it, but what I would like to highlight is one of the trees that's been nominated and it's going to hopefully will be listed tonight is probably one of the most important trees in the country. It's probably the last tree that has viable seed, and that's the Morisbii, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, gum that's on council land. This is a magnificent tree, and it's probably the last tree with viable seed. Just through to the officers, through you, Chair. Am I correct in that assumption?
There's very limited, through you, Chair, there's very limited trees in the wild that are intact and have viable seed. So there's this one and a few other ones that have been planted that we know of that we've collected seed from. Okay,
and that was my next question. Are we collecting seed from this tree and are we propagating them?
Yes. Yes.
Fantastic.
Just for the benefit of the room, which tree is that in regards to?
Page 135. But it's a really significant tree, and there's not many in the wild. There's been trees planted, and I've only seen a few of them, and this is the best one I've ever seen. And the other ones have been pretty scraggly and like they're on their last legs. So to look at this tree, it's a really magnificent, significant tree, and I hope it lives on, and I hope we do get enough seed from it and the other few viable trees that have been planted over time, and to keep this tree in existence forever. So yeah, well done. And are we planting any more of these trees, through you, Chair, in Hobart, just as a backup for this one?
Through you, Chair, we're growing some at the nursery.
Yeah. Okay, very good. Well done.
I've now got Alderman Zirko.
I think my words have been, and Mr. Noy's words have been twisted in the sense of the intent of what I was endeavouring to say. If this tree is listed under the significant tree listing as a tree listing, then it's going to be extremely difficult for any neighbour to actually do works on there, and it'll be a massive process. Yes, maybe the neighbour might have a right, an opportunity to have a tree removed next door if it was creating a nuisance. Now, anyone who as a property owner, doesn't matter whether it's a tree or whether it's anything, if someone next door is creating a nuisance, whether it's environmental nuisance or a tree nuisance, a neighbour should have a right to endeavour to have that nuisance resolved. We get that many complaints of noise issues. That's an environmental nuisance. Now, I doubt very much the neighbour is seeking to have the tree removed. All the neighbour would be wanting to do is to ensure to protect their own property. And that's the point of what the Lord Mayor said. That's right. Everyone has a right to protect their own property. Like the tree owner has a right to protect their tree, the neighbour has a right to protect their property where that tree is overshadowing. Now, I really don't care how old a tree is, whether it's 1 year, 5,000 years. Now, I've got to say, if it's 170 years old, it must be the oldest tree in the world. Maybe we should do some research on that and see how many trees older than 170 years that we can find other than olive trees in Greece. Look, I'm sorry, I don't believe we should be taking the rights away from any neighbour. By listing the tree, you take the rights away from one neighbour, right? You don't, and by not listing the tree, the neighbour has a right to trim to the boundary. I've always been on that tangent belief, and that's the way I'm staying. A neighbour has a right. Both neighbours have a right.
Councillor Dudder.
Thank you. A question through you, Chair. A statement was made that the owner has the right to remove the tree. Once it's listed, will that right remain with the property owner?
Through you, Chair, in response to that, they will need to go through a notification process. They'll need to lodge a planning application and have that considered, and it will be considered against the criteria within the code. And depending on the nature of the request, it might not be supported.
Follow-up question, Chair, through you again. So the question is, will the right of the neighbour remain in this instance if it's listed to trim the branches?
What we've indicated already tonight in relation to that is that we're happy to provide advice to the neighbours so far as what the criteria requires for logging and trimming to provide some certainty for them in relation to that.
I just want, yes, I just want to make a number of comments. One, I think point one for me is the right of the neighbour and the right of the property owner. Now, it is the right of the property owner to bring this for listing, and I don't take that right away. We need to consider that. Secondly, with regards to right of the neighbour to do the trimming if it's listed, and if what I hear from the director, if arrangements can be made and there is that right with not too much cost and bureaucracy involved, then I think we would be on the right track, because I'm hearing from the director that that arrangement can be made. Point number two, with regards to the tree being an environmental weed, is of concern to me, and I take that point. However, the fact that this is talking about Tasmania and we don't have a legislation against it, and each jurisdiction has its own rules and laws, in the current situation, I am going according to the laws and the rules that we have for the state. And the third point I want to make here is this, that I have heard the information and the arguments and have read the report, and I am happy to go along with the professional advice given to us at this stage. Thank you.
Is there any further comment?
Are we voting on these individually, these trees, or as a block? So if I disagree with just one but agree with everything else, I'd have to vote no to the whole lot.
You're able, yeah, we can move an amendment to withdraw certain certain trees, but
well,
we're not otherwise considering them individually.
I would suggest taking that particular controversial one separately, because I'd hate to think it gets included and then people vote against everything because of one tree.
It might be best as an amendment that this be approved and with the exception of X tree, rather because it's a bit hard. There isn't a separate line item for it to take. So
we take advice from the director how we should separate that tree out. Director.
Thank you, Chair. I will take any comments from Mr. Noy, but I suggest that paragraph 1 is amended to include except in relation to 28 Denison Street, and then paragraph 2 has a new subclause C to say the removal of 28 Denison Street Weeping Willow from the listing.
And if it doesn't get removed, but then what I'm suggesting here is I don't want people to vote against the whole thing because they didn't like one tree.
That would, yeah, we can't vote on it individually because there is the items don't.
Oh, then just put it forward the way it is. Yeah.
Why don't we just have a, yeah, I was going to say you could have a new 3.
That exempts that particular.
Or people just have to vote against the entire register then.
Yeah, I don't want that to happen. Yeah, no one wants that.
No, we haven't worked out how many people are going to vote against it.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry to do this to the panel, but to the committee, but through you to the staff, the date palm on 66 York Street, for which the owner does not want it listed, even though it's on their property. Can you tell us a bit more about that tree and why we think listing a date palm in Sandy Bay that the owner doesn't want listed is a good idea?
For you, Chair. So the date palm is very much associated with the sort of Californian movement that was very popular at the time of the Civil War period. There were a number that were planted as plants that were, shall we say, a bit of a status symbol, but absolutely fitted in with the Californian bungalow style that was very popular in that time. As we said, most of the palms have been removed, but this one has continued and flourished and is extremely large. So it fits in with the with style and character of the area.
And through you, Chair, follow up. Who was the person who nominated the tree? If it wasn't the owner, it's on private property.
Yeah, look, that would have been a nomination from the member of public. I'm not sure what specific that is at the moment, but a number of the trees have been for members of the public to nominate those trees. So.
And one final question: in the modern context, if as a arborist or as a tree expert, if somebody said to you, "I want to plant a date palm in my front yard," what would your advice be?
So, through you, Chair, as always, it would be a right tree, right place. So if there's sufficient space and area and that's the look that they're going for, then there's no reason that I would say that's an inappropriate species.
If I may, just a tiny bit of debate on that specific item. The owners have said that fronds are large enough that they fall and smash their have had multiple insurance claims for fronds falling and smashing the window, which is reflective of the type of tree that will continue to drop fronds. It's not dropping a branch, is not a one-off thing for a date palm. They drop fronds, that's what they do. I think, just through you, Chair, I think they also have large seed pods, is that correct?
They can, yeah.
Does that pose a hazard if they're close to the footpath?
They tend to drop, not typically, yeah.
Okay, thank you. I guess just some of the debate on the previous item has spoken about the rights of a property owner to protect a tree that's part of their private property that they think is significant for their property. And here we have a member of the public who loves a tree, but the private property owner says this is actually a hazard. There's stuff falling through my front windows and smashing glass. And I'm a bit confused how we can run one argument for one tree and the opposite argument for another. I'm not really sure of the wisdom of the date palm either. It's not a local species again, but it's also, I think, the only tree in the street. It's not like part of a pattern of trees through you, Chair. It's a standalone item on the street. Is that correct? Yeah.
Yeah, I believe so.
Yeah. So I'm a bit concerned about that one being on the list as well, to be honest.
Yeah, look, I've got Councillor Kelly, but I was going to say something very, very similar. I think if we're talking about the rights of property owners to do what they want on their property, then we got to be. I think we need to be consistent about that. There's a number of items, including the one that Councillor Basalt raised. In addition, we've got 6 Romilly Street, and reading some of the comments made in representations, tree on their property was nominated without their consent or consultation, and the burden is placed on the property owner to justify why the tree should not be listed. The representative requests the removal of their English oak tree from the nomination process and expresses a desire for changes to the process, including requiring written permission from property owners before nominating a tree on their behalf. I think if we are talking about respecting the rights of property owners, many of these trees that are on the property of the property owner, not necessarily the person, and they're the objector. There's as Councillor Basalt said, there's instances of concerns of safety. There's issues of large costs of maintenance that are going to be placed on property owners who did not ask for a tree that sits on their property to be nominated, and they've objected, and it seems that the objections have been taken on board, but every single item has been retained for recommendation to be listed. So, look, I'm happy to listen to debate. I wouldn't want the particular trees to lose out because I'm talking about the entirety of this list, but I'd be more than happy to approve the significant tree list with the exemption of all these listed trees here that have objections on them. But I'll let the debate continue. I know Councillor Kelly had his hand up.
Sorry, but would you backflip on that one where it is the private property owner does want it? No. Sorry.
Order. I've got Councillor Kelly next.
Yeah, it's a tough one. This, isn't it? You know, here we are being arborist experts, and whether it's safe or not, and whether we can cut roots, we could talk all night, I guess, about every individual tree. It's a really tough one. Conversely, I think it's about every person who has a significant tree in their house, especially in Hobart. I'd be very surprised. I know it has happened, but in the great majority of cases, a landowner would not want to do that if it was a beautiful, significant tree. So that's the other side to the thing. You know, here we are disputing what an expert says, and then we look it up, and it does appear to be conflicting in some ways. So, I mean, we could just be debating forever on this, and yeah, I don't know, I'm a bit confused with that. That's our job, though, and these are the nitty-gritty things, I guess, as councillors we've got to do and cop the flak whichever way we go.
I know you were asking before about amendments or moving that tree separately. Did you want to put anything down, or?
Yeah, I think I'd like to propose that that is amended.
As suggested by the director?
Yeah.
Which one?
You've got, okay, is that gonna, that might pop up on the screen. Oh, there we go. That's as suggested by the director. Oh, we've lost it. We've got it back.
Okay.
Chair, is there a way to give us a chance to see if we can approve or knock back 28 Denison Street? This sort of just excludes it without giving us a chance to vote on it.
Well, you'd be voting on whether or not to exclude it from the list. Yeah,
Vote against it. Yeah.
It's an amendment. It's not just happened. Yeah. So were you happy to move that?
Yeah, I'd be happy to move that.
Okay,
Yeah.
so we've got that moved. Is there any further discussion?
Can I just ask one question, Chair, through you to the relevant director? Is there anything stopping a anonymous person from going through Cascades land and nominating every tree in there, given that it's private property and that it's an anonymous process by which you can nominate trees?
It's not anonymous. You have to be a real person.
Yeah, but the Romilly Street item, the owners have stated that it was an anonymous nomination and the name was never provided. Is that correct?
No, well, I'm fairly confident there would have had to be a name.
Yeah, look, through that form process, look, you do have to provide a name there. Look, I mean, I don't know if the system's sophisticated enough, someone could make up a name, but look, I think, you know, that process is allow the public to make nomination of trees they feel contribute to the community, so anyone could, you know, make that nomination. Yeah, look, we would require a name.
Yeah, so but for the purposes of anybody outside of the council offices, it would be anonymous, would it? As far as the identity of the person who's made those, like those names aren't available to anyone outside of the council staff, are they?
But we do that for planning, other planning items, where representations are received.
Representations to planning applications, we wouldn't, but those names do become available viewers lodged, and we're required to circulate those to the appeal tribunal. In relation to scheme amendments, specific scheme amendments by proponents, those names become available. This list was generated through a public nomination process, and council officers evaluated those and put forward from council that nomination list. So those people that actually nominated wouldn't, their names would not necessarily appear on a public record, because that process was separate to the statutory process.
I've got Alderman Bloomfield, I've got the Deputy Lord Mayor, and then I think we've all ventilated this reasonably well. We do need to move on to other items, so I'll start putting those motions. But Alderman Bloomfield.
I have a lot of discomfort with Romilly Street, being that they hadn't wished to include that one, and the date palm as well. Is it possible that we do similar with those two as we have with the willow?
Oh.
Separate them all, because one is nominated by the property owner, and I think that's a different case to...
Perhaps we foreshadow it as an additional amendment, so we can vote on them separately and do it in a similar Would that...
One's a bit different. One's the property owner wants the listing.
No, I appreciate that, but these two here also, I'd just like to know that we're not going to, because I wouldn't approve the whole lot if these were included.
If you like, you can foreshadow an amendment to remove that one as well. I think we can do them separately, so we can vote on an amendment to remove the Denison Street item, and then we can vote on an amendment to remove the Romley Street item, if that works. Deputy Lord Mayor.
Yeah, so through you to Mr. Noy or the appropriate officer, if somebody sells their property and the status of the tree is that it is not a significant tree, can that tree be cut down the first day of the new owner's wishes of wanting to cut it down?
Under normal circumstances, they can do that if it's not specifically listed.
So effectively it's not protected. Thank you.
Okay. All right, so we've got an amendment by Councillor Kelly, as was shown on the screen. If there's no pressing comments that need to be added, I'll put that. This is for Denison. This is to remove Denison Street, which was the subject of the deputations. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against say no.
No. What do we...
This is the Denison Street, which is the item, which was the subject of the deputations.
Yep.
Okay. So all those in favour say aye.
Aye for removal.
Yeah, for removal. Yep, to remove. Yeah, to remove Denison Street from the list.
List, okay, yes, right.
Not the tree.
Maybe we need a break.
To remove, okay. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against say no.
No.
Okay, show of hands, all those in favour.
Yeah,
Alderman Purcell, Alderman Bloomfield, Councillor Kelly.
And the chair. And those against?
The Lord Mayor, Councillor Sherlock, Councillor Loberger, Councillor Dutta, Councillor Harvey, Deputy Lord Mayor.
That's lost. We now have an amendment from Alderman Bloomfield for Romley Street.
Before we vote on that, can I just quickly ask the officers, just, I guess, what is it unusual for trees on private land to be protected that the owners don't want? Like this whole significant tree model, I mean, where else does that happen in Australian tree protection laws? I know that's a big question, but is it unusual to sort of list trees that the owner, and what's the philosophy behind? Is it just that a tree has a right to be there and it's bigger than property? Right? What's the sort of thinking?
I mean, the planning system affords some controls over certain things, the buildings, works and vegetation as well. Similar to a heritage listed property, just because a owner might not want that heritage site to be listed doesn't necessarily warrant the planning authority not listing it because of the values that are attributed to it. And that goes to the same extent to trees. The criteria that we're working on here is, does it have certain values for the streetscape, its form, its botanical values or historical values. And that's what we're adjudicating on here, the criteria that's been set down by council as to whether this tree has significance so far as planning is concerned. And the officer's view, it does, regardless of what the property owner believes.
And just finally, if the property owner does have real concerns about it being, a risk or damaging their property, do they have the right to come to us and make that case? And what would that generally cost for them to do that?
Well, look, with any, with any tree, there is some expectation that some maintenance may be required from time.
No, but if it was really dangerous and it was dropped, and they could show that it was really had to be removed, could they?
Look, in circumstances where it can be demonstrated that the tree is failing structurally, then we can certainly consider the removal. In fact, we have. I'm not sure whether there's exemptions. Exemptions under those circumstances where the tree is failing or dying, then it can be removed. Okay. Without necessarily having to go through.
Without a DA. Oh, okay.
I'm going to put that, I think, quickly, because I think we do have to move on to other items.
Sorry. Very quickly, I note that the date palm is quite dangerous. That's why the owner was quite concerned about it, and that they are concerned predominantly about this forced registration in the fact that they'll have to do extra work in order to get pieces remedied when it is dangerous. And my concern is that the length of time between the additional registration requirements to what they'd normally be doing could actually possibly put the council at risk, do you think, in the fact that if we become complicit in allowing a dangerous tree for longer than it should be to be remedied because we expect further paperwork. Do you know what I mean? They're not making a complaint about this registration for nothing. They have had significant issues.
Yeah. Look, in relation to the dropping the fronds, there is a maintenance program that you would normally adopt with these types of trees to minimise that risk. But clearly the tree's been there for a long time, and that risk has been managed. But if it's accentuated at all, then there is a management regime that applies to reduce that risk. We do that with our own trees, council trees. We have a management program around detecting structural failures in our trees and manage them accordingly. And that applies, and that certainly applies to...
Okay. Thank you, Director. I'll put that amendment for the, similarly to the previous amendment, but the removal of the Romley Street tree from the listing. All those in favour say aye. 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 Against say no. A show of hands, all those in favour. And against? That's failed. And the substantive motion?
Probably going to do York Street.
Can we do York Street as well?
Okay. Yeah, we'll move York Street as well. So the same as previous amendments with the removal of the tree from listing from 66 York Street. All those in favour say aye. 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 Against say no. Yeah. Show of hands, all those in favour. And against? So that one's carried. So the substantive item is now the what's listed on the agenda with the removal of 66 York Street from the listings. If there's no pressing debate, we do need to get on to the next item because there's a deputation that isn't available beyond 6:40. So I'll just put that if no one has anything really pressing to say. All those in favour of the item on the agenda with the removal of 66 York Street, say aye. 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 Say no. 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 Show of hands, all those in favour.
Deputy Lord Mayor.
And those against? so that is carried.
1 hour and 25 minutes on a tree for a drone by now.
Order. We'll move on to the next item, which is item 6.1.3, 175 Goulburn Street. We do have a deputation via Zoom from an Amanda Hodder. Hope I've pronounced that right. Thank you, Ms. Hodder. You'll have 5 minutes to present. I'll give you a warning when there's 30 seconds left, and then we'll have some questions for you.
Right, thank you. I am familiar with this until recently rental property, having been friends with its most recent tenant. The issues with the house I personally observed include black mould across 2 rooms of the house, rendering one of the rooms uninhabitable. Back half of the house permanently and constantly damp and reeking of mildew. Paint in the top layer of plasterboard bubbling and flaking off in large sheets in the living room. Running water down the back wall of the house's courtyard. Running water underneath the house, which you could see via a trapdoor in the hallway. No mains wide or permanently installed heating, and the house temperature averaged about 13 to 15 degrees in the middle of the day. The main landowners of this property have been negligent in their upkeep of the property, despite the tenant attempting to regularly update them of the ongoing issues. I think the owners have failed to maintain the building under the following Heritage Tasmania guiding principles. That's number 3. Heritage places evolve. The owners have failed to engage in ongoing upkeep of the place to help with conservation. And principle 5, to provide for a place's upkeep. Maintaining a heritage place is essential to conserving its significance. In addition to all of this, the current application to turn this house into short-stay visitor accommodation fails to meet current guidelines. And I note that some of those have already been discussed about that the driveway is unusable because it's a big concrete slab and it's broken and falling apart. It's 1 of 2 units and it's on a strata scheme. The planning scheme says that the visitor accommodation must not adversely impact residential amenities. There's about a 1 metre depth between the 2 properties. The visitor accommodation can be permitted on the same site as a dwelling housing long-term residence if the dwellings have separate pedestrian access to the road. So the residents of Unit 2, the one behind, the one we're discussing, can only access the road using a common access pathway and shared driveway, which I see has been discussed. I note that the planning application is for partial change of use to visitor accommodation. This application doesn't address the conservation work that this property desperately needs, and it's currently actually uninhabitable. I think questions need to be raised about whether the owner has provided any of the information listed under E 13.5.1, such as a conservation plan and a statement of compliance. The ongoing and persistent flooding and drainage issues that this house experiences down both the back courtyard wall and under the entirety of the house suggest that there may be more works that need to be done before this application is approved. Probably needs assessment by a qualified person to identify where the water is coming from and where it's going to. In closing, a week before the tenant moved out of Unit 1, she discovered that unbeknownst to her, a roof painter had been painting the roof of the house while she was at work. Not only is this in direct violation of the Tenancy Act and possibly some heritage guidelines because of the original shingle roof that's still underneath, it also speaks to either the ignorance or the lack of education that the owners have in regards to the habitable qualities of this property. The house is not watertight and a lick of paint isn't going to address this. The owners have ignored and denied the numerous observations and maintenance requests made of them. The direct result of their lack of action on this beautiful little old house is that it's falling apart and it's smelly and it's potentially toxic because of all the black mould. I urge the council to examine this application closely in regards to the ongoing health of the building and to hold the main landowners to account. That's probably it.
Okay, thank you very much. Are there any questions? No. Thank you very much. We'll move on to the the applicant, Mr. Ian Bakos.
Thank you, everybody.
Hello. As before, you'll have 5 minutes to speak. I'll give you a warning when there's 30 seconds left, and then we'll have some questions. Whenever you're ready.
I took the comments from the applicant via Zoom without notice, thank you. And I would dispute substantially many of the points that have been raised. In my application, I prepared some supplementary notes. These were not able to be lodged at the time of the application being prepared, and I would like to submit these to you now. My comments provide additional information and background relating to the change of use application to short stay accommodation. The property is a heritage listed dwelling constructed in 1841 from local stone and timber in the Georgian architectural style. The dwelling originally served as an inn until being converted to residential use in the early 20th century. It is solidly constructed with walls up to 50 centimetres thick, finished externally with cement render and internally with solid plaster. The dwelling was sympathetically renovated between 2005 and 2010. The current owner purchased the property in 2010. Since 2010, the property has been let as rental accommodation. In that time, the property has deteriorated through normal wear and tear. In addition, water ingress has been a problem, with remedial work undertaken to repair the roof and improve rainwater drainage over several years. I should add to that point that the difficulty of maintaining this property has actually been, and is recorded by numerous exchanges with our property manager in Hobart, lack of skilled trades available to actually undertake the work. This has been a serious problem for us. The application to convert the intended use of the property short stay accommodation is based on and or supported by the following factors. Full-time use of the property as a dwelling has led to comparatively high levels of wear and tear throughout. Experience has shown that over extended periods, damage and maintenance matters go unreported and therefore unremediated or unremedied. As short stay accommodation, occupancy will reduce from 100% to approximately 65%, with a proportional reduction in wear and tear. The current owner, that's me, resides interstate, and I intend to use the property for personal accommodation when visiting Hobart with my wife, something that we do on average 3 to 4 times a year, further reducing the effective open market occupancy rate. Day-to-day management of the property will be handled by a professional hosting provider based in Hobart. Guests making bookings will be screened for suitability, and a minimum 2-night stay filter will be applied. The target market will be interstate and international visitors to Hobart seeking authentic colonial style accommodation within walking distance of the city and waterfront. The target guest profile is for couples, typically older, seeking a high quality accommodation experience. The small size of the dwelling, less than 900 square metres with a single bathroom, largely precludes its potential use as a place for larger gatherings. Filtering by the hosting provider will ensure a maximum occupancy limit of 4 guests. I would also add, and in contradiction of the previous speaker, that in relation to the roof being painted, there was communication with the occupant. There are no shingles under the iron roof. I've been up into the roof myself. There are battens, but no shingles. The house is substantially solid and intact. We did, however, discover that drainage with the location of a pit with a submersed pump had not been functioning for a number of years, despite paying contractors in Hobart to attend site to actually ensure that drainage was working effectively. We have had to remediate the roof to have water not run down the back wall, a very simple process which took a competent tradesman 1/2 of a day. That's now been resolved. We believe that the property is not falling apart. It does in fact have mains wired heating, and the adequacy of that would be open to question, I acknowledge. We believe that modest improvements, basically painting carpets and making sure that the building is watertight, will have the building in a more than satisfactory condition for its intended purpose for short stay accommodation. That's all I have to say.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions? I've got Councillor Lohberger and then the Deputy Lord Mayor.
Thank you, Chair. Through you, my apologies, I'm going to have to ask the question asking this way, facing this way. The application just notes that there will be no car parking on the site, and yet there is actually a parking space there. How will that be policed, will the space be blocked, or will you just rely on goodwill of the short stay tenants?
It will be blocked.
Yep. Deputy?
Thank you, through you, Chair. Thanks for your response. We heard the deputation from one of the representors. I've read through the representations, and indeed the concerns about the mould is obviously of greater concern. How is it likely that you'll be able to control that with this new or this change of use?
Yeah. The mould has been caused by water saturation of the sandstone wall on the western side. That was caused by a faulty rain head box drain, which was allowing water to run behind the drain box itself and percolate into cracks within the wall. With the removal of water being able to access the wall, it is now drying out. It's drying out quite rapidly, and we're using radiant heat to increase the speed of that drying out. Also, we intend to batten the internal wall with a false layer, basically a gyprock wall, to allow moisture to evaporate behind that layer. And we've had advice that that is a very common practice in this situation.
And just a subsequent question. So if you have a property manager and it's short stay accommodation, then how is it controlled, you know, like if there's any mould that's returning?
We'll actually be in the property ourselves as well. So we'll actually be monitoring and doing works on the property ourselves.
But you have a property manager?
That's right, we'll have a hosting manager, yes.
And just one final question, just this is a stratum title. So from the plans, it looks like it's pretty much on the same site. How do you keep that separation from?
There's effective separation now. It's been two separate tenancies for the last 10 or more years, 13 years in fact. There is a side pathway that leads to the rear accommodation, and it's completely divorced from the house at the front, which is our property. I can't see any reason why that degree of privacy would be impinged by change to short stay, especially with the reduced number of nights occupancy. The figure of 60 to 65% is on professional advice. It's not our opinion.
Thank you.
Next. Oh, thank you. If you'd like to return to your seat, thank you very much. I'll open the item. Councillor Basalt.
Thank you. Through you, Chair, to the relevant director. Given the nature of the concerns raised by the representative and some of the solutions and remediation works proposed by the proponent, is this sufficient enough to prompt building inspection from council?
Through you, Chair, the condition of the property is not relevant for the planning application.
Yeah, I'm aware of that, but given that we have been told in an open forum about the condition of a building being uninhabitable, aside from the planning decision tonight, are we obliged to follow up on building regulation compliance because of the way we've been informed of these concerns this evening?
I would have to take that one on notice, actually.
Further comment? Councillor Dada.
Just a question through you, Chair. In the assessment, it states that it is assessed with regards to privacy and noise. Now, how and when was the noise assessment done? And what evidence do we have?
Through you, Chair, an assessment has been done based on, I guess, common experience and with the getting some reassurance from the fact that a visitor management plan would be a condition of any permit that was issued, which is what we've recommended. So we're satisfied, and the recommendation is that the noise would not be disruptive to the remaining residential use.
Just a follow-up question. So this common experience is anecdotal, would that be right?
Through you, Chair.
Thank you.
I'll clarify that these are expert planners who use their experience to form their views, but yes, there's an element of practical use.
Alderman Bloomfield.
From talking with other applications and how things play out, I've noted that its council has in the past requested when there is no parking available that it should be included on their advertising on Airbnb and associated websites that there is in fact no parking, and that will be part of the terms and conditions. Is that correct with this particular application?
Through you, Chair, this is a little bit unusual, this application. One parking space has been proposed. Our development engineers have reviewed the dimensions of the parking space, and they're not satisfied that it does actually constitute a proper parking space that we'd be happy to endorse, and as such we have recommended that that's not actually taken into account as a parking space, and that the visitor management plan specifically states that there is no parking on site. So I imagine that would be part of the conditions that are advertised to potential.
It will be held up, because my understanding is that others were specifically asked and some Airbnb people are not asked. So I wanted to know whether or not we actually are including this as a condition, or are we not?
Through you, Chair, yes, it is both an express condition and also a requirement of the visitor management plan.
Who's next? Just noting that we don't have a mover of the item. Lord Mayor?
I'm just trying to get my head around the rules again about strata. So the baseline rule is that you can't, a strata scheme which is used for residential can't be used for visitor accommodation.
Yeah. Are you referring to strata body corporate rules?
No, the planning scheme, the directive.
Through you, Chair, page 206 of the agenda extracts the performance criteria that would need to be met if this was visitor accommodation use was to be approved in a strata context.
But yeah, I guess the starting point is that visitor accommodation is not allowed in a strata complex if it's also used for residential. Is that the rule?
Through you, Chair, that's I'd have to be reminded of the wording of the acceptable solution. Perhaps Mr. Eichen can help with that.
Yes, thank you. The wording of the acceptable solution is that you can't have visitor accommodation in a strata scheme. So it's not that it's prohibited, it's just that if you want to be permitted, you can't be in a strata scheme. If you are in a strata scheme, then you're discretionary, which is an alternative way to meet the standard. Yeah. So it is allowed, but it's a discretionary pathway through.
Yeah, and then only if there's a separate entrance. Is that right? Is that?
Through you, Chair, no, there's no requirement for there to be a separate entrance. So in the page that Ms Avey referred to sets out the performance criteria, and so they're the criteria that you're assessing it against.
Yeah, I seem to remember one in Wapping where there was a big issue around separate entrances, but maybe that was just related to the privacy, captured under the privacy element.
Yeah, there is a slightly different test for the Wapping visitor accommodation, so perhaps that was a slight difference.
Any movers of the item? Councillor Basalt, that's just the officer recommendation? Yep. Any further discussion? Councillor, Deputy Lord Mayor, and then Councillor Loberger.
After Councillor Loberger.
Councillor Loberger.
Look, just through you to the staff again, Chair, I just wanted to sort of just investigate the P2 part of Planning Directive 6, the part that just says visitor accommodation within a strata scheme must not cause an unreasonable loss of residential amenity to long-term residents occupying other lots within the strata scheme. Just note part F of that says having regard to any impact on shared access and common property. Do we have shared access here at this site?
Through you, Chair, yes we do, to the extent that I believe the front unit is Unit 1, and to be able to access the rear yard of Unit 1, you do need to go down the side of the property. So that the side down the side of Unit 1 is a shared access, yes.
My hearing, I mean, just through you again, Chair, it just says, you know, that must not cause unreasonable loss of residential amenity. Long-term residents occupying other lots within the strata scheme having regard to any impact on shared access and common property. Is this something under which we could potentially knock it back, and how would we go in the tribunal if we were to do so?
Through you, Chair, the current advice is that the application be approved, and I can't make any comment about being able to source an expert who would support a decision to refuse this application.
Deputy.
Yeah, my question through you, Chair, is in relation to a stratum title. So we've had a situation where there have been apartments and we refused in Sandy Bay. I think it was Churchill Avenue or something like that, because it was a significant proportion of that stratum title. Here we have 1 out of 2, so is that not the similar sort of test?
Through you, Chair, the application you're referring to in Sandy Bay was would have meant that the majority of the strata title units would be visitor accommodation, and here we have 1 of 2, so 50-50. Where is the line in the sand? We're saying we think this is appropriate, and there are a number of applications that have been approved in similar circumstances. Of course, it's up to elected members to disagree with that.
Yep, thank you.
If there's no other comment, Councillor Dutta.
Thank you, Chair. Now, I have a different opinion on this. With regards to the performance criteria, clause 3.1e, the visitor accommodation within a strata scheme must not cause an unreasonable loss of residential, and we take into account the following, having regard to the following, A to F. And I refer to B, like any likely increase in noise. Now, the question that I asked with regards to noise was based on a common experience, which was anecdotal. Similarly, I have had a number of experiences with visitor accommodation, and one was very close to our house, where in fact the tenants did not make as much noise when it was converted to Airbnb. So my own anecdotal experience and a number of others that are here gives me a different perspective, and on that ground, clause 3E1E, I would refuse on the basis of B that there would increase in noise. Now, will the noise be unreasonable loss of residential amenity? That has to be proven, because I haven't been given evidence that it will or not. So therefore, I would use my discretion under that provision. Thank you.
So is that a foreshadowed?
I would foreshadow.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
If there's no other comment, I'll put the motion as recommended by Councillor Basalt. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Against say no.
No.
Show of hands, all those in favour? And those against? So that's lost? So that's, yeah, and 6. Yeah, that's lost. Okay, we've got the foreshadowed for refusal by Councillor Dutta. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against say no. No. Show of hands. All those in favour. And those against? And that is carried, yes. So that's that will go to 6-5. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so that's that was refused. We'll move on to the next item, which is the last item for deputations, which is 29 Trumpeter Street. We've got 2 deputations. We've got first of all, Representative Angela Mansfield. Ms. Mansfield, if you'd like to come up to the table in front of you.
Images here as well. Let's have a look at them.
It's around.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Mansfield. Just like all the others, you'll have 5 minutes to speak. Yeah, bring that as close as you're able, and speak as close as you can. I think I've had some people send me messages that they're having a hard time hearing. Oh, it's not you, but you'll have 5 minutes to speak. I'll give you a warning when there's 30 seconds left, and we'll have some questions for you.
So hello, my name's actually Lottie. I'm Angela's daughter. I live at 18 Trumpeter Street, Battery Point, with my sister, mum and dad. In our report, you would have read in detail about our story and situation, but in summary, we did not oppose the new development, we supported it, but at the end of construction, early December last year, we came home to see this monster fan 1 metre from our boundary, towering over our small backyard. Our house borders the hotel on 2 boundaries. If you see in some of the photos, they surrounded our property with 7 new fans. Their block is 1,463 metres square, but they deliberately put all new fans 1 metre from our boundary. Yes, we understand the logistics of location near infrastructure, but this was just lazy, inconsiderate, illegal and arrogant design and installation. The fans combined run from 7 a.m. until at least 10:30 p.m. 364 days a year. People say, but you live next to a pub, what do you expect? Well, this hotel is in a residential zone. We had always loved living next to a hotel, all the funny going-ons, but this is completely different. On page 532 and page 535 of the agenda, it is written that the fans have been installed on a relatively recently constructed section of roof. No, this outbuilding was actually built in the early 1800s, so I'm pretty sure that's not recent. So the hotel is listed as a heritage place in table E13.1 of the planning scheme, also listed on the Tasmanian Heritage Register. The council's cultural heritage officer supports the fans' appearance and location. If this type of development is now encouraged by heritage professionals who are meant to protect the heritage integrity of our community, in the future, what is to be left? What else will they label as insignificant? Rooflines and vistas are so important in a heritage precinct. If you watch what the tourists take photos of, it is often of the roofline of the heritage buildings. If anyone at council read our 3,900 word report we sent with our representation, it outlined our rebuttals and responses to sections of the planning scheme, heritage register, etc., that were either blatantly ignored or in the build or highlight our points perfectly. In the agenda, section 6.4, it says the proposed, it's not proposed, it's actually already been put there. Mechanical plant is considered to be a minor development. To who? If you see in our report, we extensively found sections from the planning scheme that stated no nuisance or detrimental effect is likely to be caused to nearby lots. This was blatantly ignored. Written in the council's agenda, it states and questions numerous times the detrimental impacts of the fans' noise emissions, stating that this detrimental impact must be considered objectively. This is such an insult. We do understand that this is a DA from the Shipwright Arms Hotel side, but it has just added to the hopeless distress that we have felt over the last 9 months, that we have not had one visit from Heritage, Stanton, or even the owner. A council representative from planning only just for the first time visited a few weeks ago. What upsets and frustrates us the most is Shipwrights have been supported and enabled to keep using their illegal fans and continuing business as normal. They were always over the legal decibel limit to the council's knowledge, and not once were they ever requested to be turned off. Why is it okay to have such an intrusive noise from your neighbour violating through your home, infiltrating into our bedrooms at night? Why is it deemed okay that our backyard has been bastardised, destroyed, and it's up to others to decide this is okay? How can others blatantly be allowed to destroy the value of our house and our lives? At a loss for our future, we have had real estate agents visit our home. One walked in and said, "What a beautiful house," and when they got to the backyard, loved it until they looked up and said, oh dear. The other agent loved our house so much, but explained that the noise and visual pollution of the fan has significantly dropped our property value and would become the major factor in our house not selling. We would once spend much of our time in our beautiful garden. It was so serene you could hear the birds. Now, during the day, it is like an airdrome and nights are much worse, but apparently it is quiet and in no way detrimental. Inside our home, the constant drum is so mentally disturbing at night. My mum took a photo of my sister on Friday night. 3 a.m, she was sound asleep with a pillow covering her head. One of the many nights they left the front fan running 24 hours. We were shocked, frustrated and saddened. The council put forward recommendations to approve the retrospective EDA.
Seconds left, if you can.
No matter how many conditions are put on a permit, it is still going to continue like this. So we implore the monster fan towering over our backyard, SF1, should be removed and relocated. MF1, the front visible Trumpeter Street fan, should have a surround installed around it to hide its ugliness from Trumpeter Street, as well as reducing the nightly noise inside our bedrooms and residents on the other side of Trumpeter Street. EF1, the toilet fan should not turn on at 7 a.m, but at opening of business at 11:30 a.m. This is not too much to ask. We now know how the system works. In retrospect, we will be getting official consideration from now on. It should never have come to this for them or us. Their lazy, illegal, inconsiderate and arrogant design and installation should never have happened. Shipwright Arms Hotel and Stanton Management Group will tell you they have carried out everything by council procedures and legislation. But when you have no ethics, consideration or concern for others, it's amazing how you can bend and manipulate the system. After putting up with this for 9 months...
That's time.
Yeah.
So look.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. I'm sure there's some questions. Who wants to start off? We've got Councillor Loberger.
Thanks so much. As I've explained before, I've got to ask my question in this direction, but I'm talking to you. I just wanted to ask, could you just go through what it was that you're requesting for the various fans again? It was just a bit quick for me.
Yep. So the fan on the image, I'm not sure, yes, it's up there. So SF1 is actually towering over our backyard, 1 metre from our boundary, and we request that this be removed and relocated somewhere else where obviously we can't be imposed by it. MF1, the front one on the street face of Trumpeter Street. So that should have a surround, a heritage respectful surround put around it to stop the sound that echoes down Trumpeter Street now that our neighbours have complained about. That also emanates through our bedrooms at night. EF1, which is the toilet fan, should not turn on at 7 a.m, but at the opening of business, which is about 11:30 a.m.
Okay. Councillor Dudders next.
Thank you very much. Now, I'm just wanting to ask you a question. Thank you for your presentation. Now, the report talks of, on 6.5, page 540, that they are clearly impacting on this neighbour's use. Now, how has it impacted on you and your family?
So we can hear it, as I said, basically all day, every day. It's legally, majority of them are under the, during certain hours, said that they're under the decibel legal limit, but a lot of them actually were recorded as over the decibel limit. But that doesn't actually matter to us because we're living there. It's our home. So whether it's 1 below decibel or whatever it is, we're hearing it. It echoes through our house. At night time when it turns off at about 10:30, 11, my ears are left ringing. And it's just a very emotionally draining experience in general. But when we're out in our backyard, it's not the greatest experience. There are some videos that I did send through. I'm not sure if they were received, but they do show the sound that we can hear from our house. But anyone is welcome to come and look in our backyard, in our house, anytime to experience it for yourself.
I've got Councillor Sherlock, and then Councillor Basalt, and then I think was that the Lord Mayor with a hand up? Yep.
Thank you, Chair. My question was actually asked by Councillor Loberger, so thank you. I just wanted to write down a specific answer. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Basalt.
Thank you, through you, Chair. Do you know what the SF1 fan, what its purpose is?
Actually, not off the top of my head. I do know that one is an exhaust from the kitchen and one is of the whole building. I'm actually not 100% sure, but I do just know for sure about the toilet fan and the kitchen fan, but I don't know which of, because there's 7 around our whole border, so out of all of them, there's only 3 really, really loud ones that are making the loud noise. So yeah, I couldn't tell you, I'm sorry.
No, I don't expect you to know the answer, but worth asking. Thank you.
I've got the Lord Mayor and then Councillor Harvey.
Thanks, Lottie. I think your mum would be really proud of you doing that for her. You did a great job, and it's not easy to come into this environment, I guess. I'm just wondering about the how long this has been, like, that they've been up for?
So the construction started about the start of last year, when they were actually doing the massive development out the back of the pub, when they like tore down the wall and did all the bits in 2022. Yeah. And then so that took about 10 months to complete, and then the fans turned on early. Were actually put there early December, unknowns to us because it wasn't in the application. So we came home and it was first we'd seen it. So it was done illegally without application. And then at about 2 weeks in when they opened, then the fan was turned on. So this is mid-December, and it's just been since then. So then a few months went by, and we obviously were going through this to try and, you know, what's going on, what's happening. And so then that happened a few months where it was actually a really, really loud sound. And so then they had people come in and adjust the sounds and do things like that. But it's still there, quite just severely, it's still there. So, yeah.
And so who did you contact when you worked out that it wasn't in the original development application?
So initially we put in noise complaints, and a few of our neighbours opposite us, we didn't actually realise, but they put in noise complaints as well because it echoed through their bedroom, their front living room and front bedrooms. So we put it through a noise complaint with the health department, the environmental health department. And then we got contact back from them, and then a few months later, or a few weeks, months later, we had a representative come and do sound testing in a backyard for a day or two, and then they went and did their report, and then it's just, and then they actually looked into it and found the fans weren't meant to be there in the first place, and then that's when this all started to happen.
Councillor Harvey.
Can you explain to us what engagement you've had with the hotel proprietors?
So initially, the application they put through to develop the hotel, we were completely okay with, did not object whatsoever. It looked great. So obviously we didn't have much contact with them. They didn't come to us and say we're doing development. We just saw the plans and we're like, yep. And then when all this happened, and there was a lot of in between that happened that wasn't great with the construction. So then we contacted them, and they came, I think once maybe the publican came down, which I think is the owner's son, came and into our backyard and spoke to my dad. It was just a bit of nothing was really done or said, and then other than that, no communication. We've sent quite a few emails and received quite a few harsh emails back, but in our position, it's so not the best communication considering what's happening, but most of the communication has been through people to them.
What do you mean by harsh?
Oh, no, just not it's hard to word, but just not inconsiderate in this is our home, like this is actually happening to us. It was more just, it's hard to explain. Like, I don't think that the empathy of this is our life, this is our home was really there in how they responded and how they were following along with,
Okay, thank you.
Further questions? Councillor Kelly and then Alderman Zuko.
Through you, Chair, are you aware of any other alternative location for the main offending fans that could be on the pub, or was that discussed with the owners?
So in our report that we wrote, we did, obviously we're not engineers, but we did suggest it's hard to explain, but in one of the images there's actually kind of like a little cove around the corner where all of the exhaust fans are initially, the original ones, were placed. So I'm not 100% sure of the reasons why they had to be on that roof, or whether it was just a random sporadic, let's just put it there. But there is a position where majority of the fans before development were initially, and the sound kind of was encapsulated into that little valley of roof.
So that was never really discussed between you and the owners or anything?
Well, nothing throughout the whole development was really discussed with them. It kind of just was done and happened. And yeah, most of the discussions were done through the foreman and the builder. We mostly communicated through him when he was doing the development in our yard.
Right. But the time that was put in, that all gone?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, that was at the very, very end of the construction. The fans were put in, yeah.
Thank you.
Alderman Zuko.
Yeah, just on the fans, you made a point about what time they're switched on and what time they're not switched on. So you're saying they're switched on at 7 o'clock in the morning. Are you, just curious, which fans are switched on at 7 o'clock in the morning?
So initially, at the very beginning, basically all of them were on all day, every day. Well, I can't tell you for sure, but most of them were. But as of now, the toilet fan usually turns on about 7 a.m. I think maybe the cleaners come in and just switch them on. So that is the one, that is EF1, so that's switched on at 7 a.m. But the hotel actually opens at 11:30 a.m. when toilets would be used. And that's the one that's in our backyard. And then the front one turns on at about 10 to 11, and that's the one on Trumpeter Street, and then the one in our backyard is on about the same time. And then the toilet fan isn't as noticeable since the two big ones are on, so I'm not 100% sure when that one turns off, but the two main ones would turn off anywhere from 10:30 is when they're meant to, technically, but sometimes they forget and they are running all night, and we wake up and they're still on in the morning. So yeah, it can vary when they're on.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any further questions? No. Thank you so much for that. If you just want to take your seat again, we'll move on to the next and thank you very much. And last deputation, we've got Garn Stewart, Jack Pitt, and Roy Cloak. Apologies if I'm butchering anyone's pronunciations.
Got it right.
All right, yeah, if you guys want to take your seat. As per all previous, you'll have 5 minutes to speak. I'll give you a warning when there's 30 seconds left, and then we'll have some questions.
We've got the owners with us as well, Mr. Paul Jupp. So we have, once we're aware of the issue with the noise, we've actually subsequently gone back, done multiple testing. We've got acoustic engineers and mechanical engineers to adjust the fan. So what we discovered was that the setting wasn't done properly, done right, and we got the contractors back in to rectify that. As for the exhaust, so the two fans that we spoke about above the cottage, so those are actually supply air intake, and that the reason for that is because all our mechanical plant is located in the roof ceiling cavity of that building structure. So there's very limited, or in fact, no other options for us to actually locate that fan because that's where the air handling unit is located. The toilet fan is on sensor, so it turns on when there's someone in it. So it may be that, if it's on at 7 o'clock, that will be someone cleaning the toilet. As for the having the fan running overnight, I don't think that occurs. I think we have got evidence to show, photographic evidence to say everything's turned off at that point in time. So I believe that's only one fan that is still exceeds the limit, which is SF1, which is adjacent to the toilet, and the proposal was to install a screen around the fan, exhaust fan itself. And what that would look like would be like chimneys, in any of the houses that you see in Battery Point or, around, Hobart. So we believe we've done everything we could to mitigate the noise situation. And in terms of visual impact, these are minor works, and we don't believe that's it's not too not in keeping with what's, around any houses you see around town. Or, structures, building structures.
Okay. Thank you for that. We've time for questions. I've got Councillor Basalt, Councillor Lohberger and the Lord Mayor.
Thank you, Chair. Through you, when you say the air handling box was installed in the roof of the cottage that immediately abuts the residential property of the representator, was that installed as part of the renovation works?
Yeah, that's it.
And is there other roof cavity within the building in which that could have been installed?
No. That's only location where there's space where we can actually install the units. Yeah. The intervention is quite, it's located with the cottage and the dining room. Everywhere else we've got rooms above, we've got existing kitchen, so we did not actually increase any of the space to allow for that to happen.
Okay. Councillor Lohberger.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Through you, you just said you had no option to relocate one of the fans. Can we just identify clearly which fan we're talking about there? They're sort of all named EF1, SF1, MF1, KH1. Which one are we talking about?
That would be SF1 and MF1.
So neither can be relocated. That's still evidence.
Sorry?
So neither of those could be relocated?
No, because the air handling unit is located within that cavity.
So just through you, Chair, it seems to me that you don't have to put the chimney or for these fans right on top of it. Was there any work done on, say, piping air in or piping air out and placing these extraction fans at a different location?
That's a mechanical question. It would involve putting a very big duct.
Yeah, that's it, I guess, ducting.
And
yes.
relocating it. Yeah, it's a very constrained site. Yeah.
So just to be clear, you didn't investigate ducting air in from a different location?
We will look at all options to try to minimize the where we can actually locate the impact. But the reality is that's the intervention is so minimal, and that's the space where we nominated because there's actually a space to actually install the air handling unit. Anywhere else, it will be sitting above the roof line or creating another structure to conceal that the unit itself.
Just last question through you, Chair. Is there any reason why these fans didn't go through planning, or they were just sort of tacked on at the end?
So these are usually dealt with during building process. So and during the planning process, we're more concerned with the actual build form, and we don't really go too much into the mechanical system design until the building stage. So when we and usually these are seen as low impact works that does not detract from the overall impact, visual impact. So it is in this instance unfortunate that it's so close to the boundary, and it is a lot more visually obvious to the neighbours.
So just to confirm, these fans weren't included in the planning process because you feel that they were too minor?
They were identified during the building design as part of the building approval process.
Thank you, Chair.
So in order, I've got the Lord Mayor, Councillor Dutta, Councillor Harvey and Councillor Sherlock. And Councillor Kelly.
So yeah, I'll have to ask the director about the fans and the planning process, because I think normally we would see the heating and the fans on as part of a planning design. So I'm just a bit surprised that we wouldn't get that, because we not often it often does come up. And there's seven new big, sort of fairly big fans in a. Were they all seven?
Yeah.
Some of them are smaller.
Yeah. So one is the existing exhaust that's already there. Yeah. So we've actually upgraded that to, improve that unit. It will really be three.
Yeah. So, yeah. So the KX1, which is an existing exhaust fan, we have upgraded. It is come with the existing exhaust hood, and in order to comply the makeup air requirement for their kitchen and upgrade, so we need MF1 for the kitchen, and so also we have SF1 to fulfill the fresh air requirement in the restaurant and the boardroom, and they have a boardroom which is enclosed, so we need fresh air into the room, and for the EF1 is for the new toilet, to comply,
So it was 7.
So just 4.
4, yeah. One of which is existing, and one is a toilet exhaust, which is typically a minor.
So there's been a request to have a surrounds put around some of them. Is that something you could, like if that was conditioned?
That is one of the units, SF1. We will struggle to get it under the noise limit. So the proposal was to put a screen around that.
How about MF1 too?
The noise of the MF1, I think it's now complies. It's around 38 dBA. So there was noise for MF1 because the setting of the MF1 was incorrect. It's not complied in manufacturing setting.
Lord Mayor, I'll just.
We're talking about
can we not interrupt this? I'll let you ask a supplementary question, but let's not interrupt speakers.
So you're talking about the visual of that. So the two matters, one is acoustic. So we have no issues with I wouldn't say no issues. We managed to reduce the decibel levels for all the fans bar one. And the one that is problematic, the solution would be to put a shroud, a screen around it, and have it designed and built to, resemble like a chimney stack.
But I'm just wondering, because it's a cumulative noise if you're the neighbour, and it's going all the time. So maybe just to sort of, we've got to look at the nuisance factor rather than the sort of what's acceptable, because I think under the Act, isn't it around whether it causes a nuisance or not? So the cumulative impact.
You're absolutely right. Yeah. So the cumulative emissions are measured as a whole with everything operational simultaneously.
Yeah. Sorry, and just also, is there any way that automatic timers could be added to these things so that we could condition the hours and they automatically go off and on, and so that there isn't the mistake of it going all night?
SF1 has already have a timer, so they'll be just run within the operation hours. And EF1 will just be on, so once the people use the toilet, it is activated by the motion sensor in the toilet. And MF1 and KH1 is just really manual fan, which when they do cooking, they require the fan operation, they just turn on fan.
But I guess I'm asking, if we conditioned timers and hours, would that be physically possible to achieve?
Timer off switch.
What was that?
A time off switch.
Automatic, so that it can be programmed and it goes off.
So I think it's whether the kitchen can have, because the kitchen doesn't run, they don't cook.
Yeah, if they don't cook, they will just turn off the fan.
Sometimes you might forget.
You actually do log it and photograph it every night. It does not go beyond 10 o'clock.
Councillor Dada.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for your presentation. When it was discovered that there was excessive noise, and your explanation was that the setting wasn't right, and it was then fixed by the setting. But there was one, I understand, SF1 still had that excessive noise of decibel the levels. So at what stage did you realize that that was excessive?
I mean, it was identified reasonably early on. There have actually been four separate sets of noise measurements in between which the mechanical contractor has returned to site to adjust various settings. I'm afraid I don't have details of exactly what has been done in between each one. The bathroom exhaust fan now has a acoustic shroud installed. That was the main noise control method for that particular one. The SF1 fan is the last remaining one, which requires some form of attenuation to comply with council's criteria.
Thank you.
Okay, I've got Councillor Harvey next.
Through you, when you were doing the designs for this, surely you would have had an idea of where the ducting and the plant equipment would have gone. Like, it's not your first rodeo. How many, you guys have been doing this for making businesses for years, and noise from the units on the roof is it's a problem from way back. I've come across this a number of times now, and sometimes it's resolved and sometimes bad luck, you just got to live with it. But I'm just a bit surprised that you didn't anticipate this problem based on the experience you guys have with making pubs and renovating things, and have done such a wonderful job in Hobart over the years, that you missed this. You just didn't...
Is there a question or is there a statement?
So how come you missed this during your design phases?
So the original, we did anticipate roof equipment and plant, and that was originally located above the toilet block. And what I must note is that what was approved and what we end up building is actually lower than what was previously approved. So that, and we actually, we did communicate with the neighbours early on during the build, and we actually lowered that wall to allow more light to penetrate, into the neighbouring property. So that is a, that's a, trade-off on where potentially the plant could have gone, but it will result in a taller wall, and an impact to the neighbours. So that's the one above the toilet.
But what I'm talking about is going back to that original design where, how do you design something that potentially is not going to annoy the neighbours?
You're talking about the noise issue or the visual aspect?
Well, yeah. I'm more concerned about the noise, because I know what it's like to live next door to pubs with noisy compressors and various other things. But I'm just surprised that this happened, and you guys have got so much experience.
Never been an issue with any of our projects. So unfortunately, this is the first one. And yes, we have done projects in high-profile areas. I think this is the difference is probably that it's not as noticeable when it's located further away from the boundary and in a non sort of residential neighbourhood. Yeah.
Okay, I've got Councillor Sherlock and then Councillor Kelly next.
Chair, through you. So I was just reading, it says at 3.2 that the application seeks retrospective approval, and I think it probably goes back to what Councillor Harvey was saying, and so the issue here when you started it, you didn't consider it at this point, and so you're retrospectively now wanting to...
I think we're alerted to that. Typically we'll have a location for roof, plant and equipment, and that is a bigger thing. So we've actually located the condensers, which is usually the problem, the outdoor units, at the lower ground behind the fence, so not up on the roof. So that's usually what we looked out for. In terms of air intake and kitchen exhaust, it's the kitchen exhaust was there from the beginning, and the two air intake was just when you talk to manufacturers, they'll specify. The specification would be something that would be acceptable level. So this one is, again, it's a series of factors. The fact that it wasn't adjusted properly, and one there, even if it's adjusted to the spec, it's not acceptable in this particular context. Yeah. So from an environmental perspective, it's not an issue because we were able to comply with the environmental health requirements. Is that?
Following the installation of the screen around SF1, yes.
Yeah.
I think probably similar to what the Lord Mayor was saying, I'd be interested to know the answer as well from the Director's point of view, just with regards to planning. The other thing is you stated before with regards to, I think it's SF1, and this is your quote, you would struggle to get it under the noise limit.
That's the specification of the fan itself, isn't it? Basically.
Sorry, I believe that was regarding adjustment of the operational parameters of the unit.
Okay.
Not
Not
the
SF1, not the fan itself.
Sorry?
Not the fan itself, just the. Can you explain what that quote refers to?
I think Ganch was referring to the fact that adjusting the operational parameters of SF1 will not be sufficient to achieve the required reduction.
So it wouldn't fit in within our requirements?
Required reduction in noise levels. So to achieve that required reduction, hence that is the reason behind the recommendation of installing a screen or acoustic shroud.
Okay, great. And then, so you already heard as well, and I think the Lord Mayor referred to that, those conditions that have been suggested. So for SF1, which is covers over the backyard, for it to be removed, would that be something you'd consider?
Sorry, what was
You wouldn't be able to remove SF1, would you? So it wouldn't be a condition you'd consider?
It means we'll have to duct the thing to, it will still be big and it'll take up, it'll be more visually impact because the fan actually fits into the roof cavity. So to try to relocate that, we've got to put a duct externally, which will be a higher visual impact to the...
So that's a no?
Yeah, the answer is no.
Okay. Yeah. And then MF1, which is on the front street facing side, it was suggested that a surround be put on it so it's more respectful to heritage and also reduces noise. Is that possible?
I believe MF1 from an acoustic perspective it's no longer an issue because we managed to adjust it. So if we, is that?
From a noise perspective.
From a noise perspective, yeah.
Yeah, it's only from a noise perspective. So that's a no?
It's not.
We've already been dealt with? Or?
Yeah, it's already been dealt with. Yeah.
Okay, so we've got two contradicting points there. You say it's been dealt with, and then.
We've done multiple testing, so we've got to rely on the test results from the acoustic engineer.
And then the EF1, which was it was requested that it be turned on at 11:30, and you noted that was the toilet fan. Is that correct? Yeah. And then somebody stated that's actually activated by the sensor. So you're asserting that realistically there is never at any point it is on after 11:30 p.m. Is that correct?
You're talking about the toilet fan?
EF1.
Yeah, they're operated by a sensor. So the cleaner possibly would be there normally at 7 o'clock, but they'd leave and then it'd go off. And then, but the venue's normally closed by roughly 11.
So
the kitchen's definitely done by 10 o'clock.
So you're asserting that generally it wouldn't even go off past 11:30 p.m. EF1 is it?
Shouldn't unless someone decides to use the toilet at midnight. But I suppose is that possible to put a timer on that? At the time of the.
I have a question. Yeah, I've got Councillor Kelly next, and then did you have a
question?
And then I've got Councillor Kelly, and then Alderman Zuko, and then Alderman Bloomfield.
Just to clarify, did you say you forgot to put them on the development application, the existence of these new roof fans, or are you saying it's normal practice not to do that?
We have not done it in this instance because we have not identified. We haven't actually did the detailed design for the mechanical.
So you're saying you don't need, in your opinion, you don't need to put these on a development application?
It was, we didn't put it in because at that stage we haven't actually done the design.
No, you're not answering the question.
Okay, so please.
To your understanding, you put these on a development application or not?
Sorry, can you repeat the question? Do we know we...
Is it your not? Did you understand that, or what's your interpretation? Do you have to put all these exhaust units, which appear quite visibly on the roof, as part of a development application? Yes or no?
Yes.
No, thank you. That's what I need to know. Also, to the these exhaust fans, I had an inquiry from a few people about this, how regarding to heritage aspects, you made no attempt to colour the galvanised sheet metal, which is completely different to the colour of the roof, the pub and everything else. Was there any consideration given to the heritage aspects of the shiny galv steel metal? I mean, all that, because they're quite prominent, as you can see from the pictures from everyone.
I think the roof cowl was powder coated, wasn't it? Was it gal?
No, it's not.
I believe that the bottom duct was powder coated in grey to match the roof cowl. And then
There's quite a few elements there to the steel gal. Obviously not then. Also, could you just remind me what SF1 is for, that fan? What does it actually do? What part of the building and what does it ventilate?
It supplies the fresh air to the restaurant and the broth room in the restaurant.
So it's for fresh air ventilation in the restaurant?
Yeah.
In the restaurant?
Yeah, in the restaurant and in the broth room below the roof.
You're saying there's absolutely no...
We let them complete their answer before we follow up with supplementaries, please, without interrupting.
You could consider SF1 is a supply FM for the whole restaurant.
For the whole restaurant, okay. And you're absolutely certain you can't relocate that exhaust to reduce that amount of area? You're saying it has to be in that exact location?
Supply FM, we cannot relocate it because we have to run a ductwork within the roof space to supply the air to the air handling unit into the roof space. And there's no other space that we can have this mechanical unit to supply.
Quite sure of that?
Yeah.
I know, I mean, I had a lot of experience running these fans where you can. It is more expense and hassle, but to do it you can. And you've made mention that a suggestion was to put timers on. You're saying you cannot put timers on the whole thing? Because I know humans make mistakes. You know, people leave lights on and they come early. Cleaners come. Cleaners do go in and out of cupboards. And I can imagine that from 7 a.m, whilst it's not the operational part of it, it just goes on.
We can put
so I know you can, but I'd like to know your opinion. You can or you cannot put timers on these electrical systems?
If we can put timer on.
Okay. Yeah. All right. No, that's all. Thanks very much.
Can I just talk about why it's the impact on relocating the fence would be worse, because the tube hip roofs. So to be able to, and that's where all the handling unit occurs. So if we decide to relocate, it means that we've got to bring a big duct from the hip roof to another location, which will actually be above the roof line.
Would you do it internally in the roof? Run the duct?
There's no roof.
There's two hip roofs on the site, so you've got to come up to a hip roof.
And between the roof, we have beams there, so we cannot penetrate.
Yeah, but duct's flexible. A lot of this is flexible stuff. But anyway, yeah, thank you.
It will be an external duct. Yeah. That's what I'm saying.
Right.
Yeah.
It will be an external duct, which will be above the roof line.
Alderman Zirko.
I'd say through you, Mr. Chair, through to the appropriate officer.
We'll do questions to the officers after the deputations are
right,
over.
okay.
So if you could, do you have any questions of
it's relevant to, because then I'm going to ask the gentleman the question as well, because I need to know that factor before I can ask the question on that factor. Okay, look,
go for it.
Is that okay?
Yep.
Is there, under the Environmental Noise Act, a set of noise criteria that needs to be met? Okay, and I'll get back to my supplementary question to you in a moment. Can you, through the chair to the appropriate person that can answer this, can you meet with the proposed changes you're looking at, meaning screening and changing probably the speed of the fan or what you're proposing, meet the criteria under the Environmental Noise Act?
Yes.
Okay. My supplementary.
Alderman Zirko, I allowed that question so you could ask your question.
Right. I'll leave my next questions to to later. Thank you.
Alderman Bloomfield.
So you were experienced builders. You were clearly aware that roof furniture and fans require a DA normally, yes?
Yes.
Okay. So at what point were you intending to actually put the DA in for these installations?
I think, well, to be honest, this was probably missed out because it was installed at a much later point.
Because why wasn't there a DA put in when there were noise complaints?
I believe that's when we started to investigate the matter and put in...
For 9-month leave.
Alderman Blue, let them finish and then you can ask a supplementary, please don't interrupt.
We knew, when we heard of the problem, we started doing the inspections and doing the testing, and we were preparing to do the work. So we've actually started preparing for the planning application, shortly into once we heard the complaints, and knew that we have to, knew that was missed out, and we have to, follow up with the planning application.
It appears to me that this retrospective has only appeared recently, and I have concerns about the 9-month space of time between when they were installed, the complaints were made, and here we are today. How long is it going to take for compliance to occur? How much longer are the community going to be tolerating the inappropriate noise?
We've done forecasting, and we've done work since we heard the complaint, and we've been back multiple times, and from what I understand from an acoustic perspective, there's only one that's non-compliant, and that requires a screen around that one exhaust fan, which we will have all intention of actually implementing.
How long?
So, well, once we get a permit, we'll get onto it straight away.
Any other questions? Councillor Basalt.
Thank you, Chair. Just having listened to debate, I just had one further. So SF1 is the primary problem, as I understand it.
Remaining problem.
Yes. The condition here says that the times are 8 a.m. till 6 p.m. and 6 p.m. till 8 a.m., which, given the nature of the business, would mean that SF1 needs to run below 39 decibels while the business is active. Can you achieve that?
Yes.
So, and just a supplementary question to that through your chair. So your intention would be that the acoustic shrouding would produce under 39 decibels 24 hours a day?
From SF1 alone, yes.
Okay. Is there any other fan that would be beyond 39 decibels?
At the boundary, no. So for context, at the very first set of measurements, I think in February, the toilet exhaust fan was the worst offender. That has subsequently been adjusted, and following the remeasuring after those adjustments, which demonstrated that a sufficient reduction was not achieved, a acoustic shroud was then installed on that fan, following which it is now compliant. So the only fan that is that is remaining with a noise emission above 39 dBA at the boundary is SF1. So following the shroud installation on SF1, all 4 fans running concurrently will be compliant.
There's no further questions. Thank you for your contributions. I'll invite you to take your seat again, and I will open the item. I've got Alderman Zerko.
And especially actually after Councillor Basalt's questions there, through you to the appropriate officer to answer the question, please. Will the recommendations that are in the report meet the requirements under the Environmental Noise Act and meet the 39 decibel requirements?
Through you, Chair, it is anticipated that once the further works that would be conditioned are done, then it would meet those requirements. I will draw to the elected members' attention that this is a little bit of an unusual application, and there's a test that must be met, that the works there must be no detrimental impact on the adjoining uses. So that's an additional layer that the elected members need to assess tonight.
Let's hypothetically say that the new works don't meet that requirement. Would our officers pursue and ensure that they meet those requirements under the Environmental Noise Act?
Through you, Chair, we'd probably, frankly, use the planning process as the enforcement mechanism, but yes, that is available to us.
Okay, and my last question is, if the works that are being proposed meet the requirement, decibels, that is the intent, and would that appease the Environmental Noise Protection Act?
Through you, Chair, I think the short answer is yes, but that's not the full answer that needs to be considered by the elected members tonight.
Okay, thank you.
Right, I've got Councillor Basalt, but just off the back of that, and I'm reading the criteria on clause 9.1.1 on page 540, where it says where there is no detrimental impact or adjoining uses. How do we go about assessing that? Because no detrimental impact could just as well mean that if I could hear it at all, how do we assess what constitutes a detrimental impact and what doesn't?
Through you, Chair, or to you, Chair, the test is an objective one, so it's something that is able to be objectively measured. So if there was a particularly sensitive person living in the property who had a dramatic reaction, then that would not be relevant. So it's an objective test, but the test is about having no detrimental impact. That suggests that there is a possibility for there to be some impact, but it can't be harmful essentially to those adjoining users.
And those standards are what's included on page 541, which is the 39 decibels.
We have used that as our reference for doing that assessment, mindful that the scheme would normally say that is an acceptable outcome for an application.
Oh, okay. And the 45 dBA would be a discretionary. I've got Councillor Basalt, then I've got the Lord Mayor, and then I've got Councillor Harvey, Councillor Dada, Councillor Kelly.
Thank you, Chair. Just wanted to clarify, is the measurement of decibels recorded at the property boundary or at the unit itself to meet this requirement? Bearing in mind, while you're looking at that prevailing wind will affect the measurement at the boundary.
Excuse me, yes, that is at the boundary of the site. There is an overlaying requirement in the environmental legislation that you don't cause environmental harm or an environmental nuisance. Again, that would be by reference to these criteria. So it is potential, I guess, that if inside the property there was a different measurement, then that could be relevant to under that legislation.
Lord Mayor.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I have to go, but I was just wondering whether, if somebody was of a mind to do it, would it be okay to add something around the operating times be closer to the operating hours of the facility, more like sort of 11:30 a.m. through to 10 p.m. All of the fans, and that they be required to be on a timer?
That could be conditioned.
If someone would like to add that, if they're of a mind, or do you want me to do that before I go? Because I've got.
Councillor Dalla?
Yeah, I would want to move a refusal. So if that's going to help the Lord Mayor.
Are you happy to take that one?
No, I'm happy to move a refusal.
Ah,
yes.
okay.
Right, okay. Well, we've got that.
I move a refusal under clause 9.1.1.
Okay.
I'm happy.
So you're...
Do you happy to take that timer one? Yeah, thank you.
And I'll keep moving my way down this list. We've got a active motion for refusal and then a foreshadowed approval with the suggested.
Question on that amendment, is that the kitchen hours or the hotel hours? Because the kitchen hours are one thing, the hotel hours, the kitchen can't operate, you know, the hotel might be open 24/7.
Well, I'd like to get clarification from the Director on that. Because as I understand it, Director, that through you, Chair, that the hours of operation are the hours of operation. Now, if the kitchen wants to go earlier or the cleaners do, well, that's not part of the application.
Can I aid the Chair with the response that was provided by the applicant to the question which related to this matter, which was that the minimum requirement, the 6 p.m. till 8 a.m. time slot, will be met 24 hours a day because of the overlap in operational hours. So if you were to apply that amendment that's been suggested by the Lord Mayor, the result would be allowing a higher noise level to run later into the night than what the proponent has said they're already going to meet.
I take your point. I think that's a debating point more than that's a point debating the amendment rather than assisting
Through you, Chair, I think what the Lord Mayor was saying, can these be put on for whatever the operational hours are with a timing unit to comply with the hours of operation. I'm not debating whether the kitchen's in or out of it, but that is a valid point.
Okay, given that it's a foreshadowed, because we've got the Councillor Dutter's refusal, the directors will work on getting advice on that, but I don't think we need to wait for that to debate Councillor Dutter's refusal, if that makes sense. We'll get back to you on your amendment. Oh, you got it? Okay, never mind.
Through you, Chair, the approved operating hours are 11:30 a.m. to midnight, 7 days a week.
So, through you, Chair, if the kitchen comes on at 9, for instance, which a lot of kitchens do, are they compliant with the operation of the fans prior to that time?
Through you, Chair, those are the hours where the venue is able to be open to the public, but correct, there would be an element of use either side of that. We'll just check those hours.
Okay.
So I think in light of what the appellant here is saying, it's a pretty big issue for them. I know it would be for me. I'd want to know, well, you can't have that as a fluid thing. The kitchen may not come on at whatever time.
We'll let them work on that. We've got a motion for a refusal by Councillor Dutter. I've got Councillor Harvey next speaking, and then everybody else has already spoken. Then we've got Councillor Lohberger.
Mine's a quick question. Well, I hope it is. Is noise accumulative? It's measured from inside your premises, but is it accumulative of all the fans going at the same time, or is it this fan, this fan, this fan, this fan? Yep, and it's measured from inside your house, in your bedroom.
The assessment under the planning scheme requires it to be done at the boundary, which presumably will be lesser impact inside with the doors closed.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Lohberger.
Thank you, Chair. Just want to speak. I think I'll be supporting Councillor Dutter's refusal because from what I can see, I really think SF1 just should be moved, inducted back in. I'm a bit late to foreshadow something on that, so we'll just see how everything else goes. But it's clear that SF1's a big problem, and from what I can see, it's still going to be causing a problem even after being screened. Question for the director or one of the officers. I've experienced this sort of thing before where fans, multiple fans operating together create quite a hum. It's quite an unusual experience, and it does tend to travel through walls and glass pretty well. Is the assessment for noise, does it take into account the type of noise, or is it just a noise assessment?
Through you, Chair, it is just the decibel level, but again, I'd remind you of the no detrimental impact requirement on top of that assessment.
Yeah, but it just is a funny thing, fans. They create quite a hum, and I suspect this is what's causing all the issues inside the house next door, with people trying to go to sleep with pillows on their heads. So look, I'll be supporting Councillor Dutter's motion at this stage. I prefer to pass this particular item with a requirement to move SF1 well away from the boundary, but I think I'm too late for that at this stage. So
if other motions fail, you
Maybe I could foreshadow.
You can, yeah.
Okay, so I'll foreshadow passing with all the same conditions apart from SF1, which must be moved.
Through you, Chair. I'll advise elected members that, in my view, that condition is not available to you, and if you were of the view that SF1 should move, then you should refuse the application overall.
Thank you.
Okay, I've got Alderman Zuko and then Councillor Dudder again.
I have a question through you to the appropriate person that can answer the question. If this matter is refused tonight, will the applicants have opportunity to take it to tribunal? Yes or no?
Yes.
Okay, and if the matter is refused tonight, will council officers be able to represent us at the tribunal?
Through you, Chair, no. It may well be that we are able to obtain an expert who would support a refusal.
Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Dudder and then Councillor Kelly.
You know, we have in this chamber many times have gone against the professional advice when we are of the opinion that we are able to argue against it. Very similar to the Airbnb one that we have just done. My reason for refusal is based on two grounds. Ground number one is that we need to take into consideration clause 911 and if it has detrimental impact. Now, the detrimental impact, if it is measured by the decibel level, then that for me does not justify the impact that the neighbours are having. Hearing their story, it appears to me quite clearly that the experience they are having is there is a harmful effect on them, there is a disruption to their normal way of life, and it is causing them some discomfort. And for me, that is a detrimental impact. So that meets the criteria of 911. Point number two is that SF1 does not meet the criteria. That is the one that is at issue. And when you read the report by the council staff on 6.7 page 542, when you put the noise barrier with regards to that one we are talking about, SF1, their statement is this, that noise emissions are predicted to be compliant. It is only a prediction, and any one of us can make predictions. It is not, in my view, to make a decision is going to be based on a prediction, and therefore my alternative argument is that I predict that it is going to be harmful. Thank you.
Before I go to Councillor Kelly, just a question off the back of that. The quote on 6.7 on page 542, was that predict where it's referencing there's a prediction that it will be compliant with noise regulations? Is that written by a layperson or a expert in the field? That quote at 6.7 on regardless where it reads noise emissions from the rooftop plant are predicted to be compliant with noise regulations. Was that written by someone expert in assessing noise standards, or is that written by a layperson?
That's by an expert.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Kelly.
Thank you, Chair. Look, I feel really sorry for two people here. One, the neighbours next to the pub, and also one for the owner. I'm absolutely amazed that a professional person who does ventilation would not have foreseen this happen. Secondly, I think it's so unprofessional. I secondly think too the time it's taken by these so-called professional people has not been good enough. And we're talking about people's lives here. When you start a situation of not being able to sleep at night, it drives you crazy. I've been under this situation myself before, and it's bloody torture. And for these people to know this has been happening and to take the time doing it, it's just not good enough. Tonight I've heard we've got the neighbour saying one thing, and then the engineer, the ventilation people saying exactly the opposite, saying it's not true. So someone's not telling the truth here. I don't know. Ventilation is extremely complex. It's extremely expensive. And I know well, it's one thing I had to do building 11 cinemas was get ventilation right, and what we did there with restricted spaces and that, you can, if you really want to, I'm absolutely not convinced that SF1 cannot be ventilated by spending more money or having a bit more of a go at doing it. You can duct and move air and do a lot of things if you really want to. I would like to have this, I'm happy to support this, conditional upon whether that's put in as conditions or as an amendment, that we get an independent ventilation expert looks at this whole thing, because it's so complex, it is so complex, and gives us an independent report as to whether this ventilation expert here is telling the truth or is up to scratch being able to design a system that this neighbour deserves to be able to live with. And we owe it to the neighbours, you know, and I've said I feel very sorry for the owner, but what would be the best way through you, Chair, for that to be conditioned on by getting someone who is an expert at it and give us the truthful report on not only the decibel, we're relying on one person here, the agent of the owner, who's his servant, to give us all these reports. I really want, and I think this chamber here deserves to get an independent report. And I know there's been heaps of times that council do this. So what's the best way, Chair, of doing that? Getting an independent report on achieving these results.
Let me just check with is that something we are able to condition?
Through you, Chair, it's important that a permit is complete and that it's not contingent on another assessment. That said, it is possible to impose a condition that there is a confirmation, for example, that the noise levels as conditioned have been achieved. That's probably the best way to achieve, I think, where you're trying to head. It's not possible for us to, for example, have an expert say, what is the best ventilation outcome? Could it possibly move? That sort of leaving things up in the air is not something we can do by condition.
So are we, through you, Chair, are we relying on the engineer here to say whether it's okay, and we believe that, or do we get, in this situation, which is so complex, I think very, very serious matter, an independent person to qualify that that's done right?
Through you, Chair, my understanding is that the applicant's experts would need to do the test once the works have been done to confirm that that's the case. We do also have internal health officers, environmental health officers, who are able to provide that independent clarification that we're satisfied with those noise results.
That's under a possible amendment that would require those things to be met. Is that what you're?
Sorry, if I could just have a moment.
Yeah, you're right.
I think if we could distill this down, if it's going to make it easier to say an independent person gives a report that it is compliant. Look, if it passed muster,
I think as the director, while she's looking up that information, I think as she was indicating, we can't predicate it on a report, but we can predicate it on a condition that the proposed decibel limits are reached before a permit's issued. So that is something that can be added to a foreshadowed motion. You could say this is permitted provided that it meets the required decibel standards.
Yes, tested by an independent person. I do not trust the current people, but I will trust an independent report.
Through you, Chair, there is a proposed condition, ENVHES1, which requires the applicant to provide a report that the noise requirements have been met. We could take on board your request for that to be independently verified. That would not need to be imposed by a condition.
So that would be checked later on by an independent? No. Yeah, I mean, I don't want to refuse it. If I'm not going to get that 100% guarantee, I will refuse it. But I'm trying to make this work for both parties here.
You can, like in your foreshadowed motion, you can include that test be signed off on by an independent person. You can add that in your foreshadowed motion. That's up to you.
Yes, but can I do that, please? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
We have to vote on the refusal first, but
okay.
It's up to the mover. If you have a foreshadowed motion and you'd like that. That one. That's that one there. Yeah, you can add that.
I'll vote to support the motion, foreshadowing that it's dependent on a report, correct?
That the decibel limits that are required to be met according to this report are met, and those tests are signed off by an independent person. You can't predicate it on a report, but you can predicate it on them meeting the decibels that they said. Okay, I've got Alderman Zuko, and then I've got Councillor Sherlock.
Through you to the appropriate officer can answer this. Do we have a compliance officer?
Through you, Chair, yes.
Is the compliance officer got the responsibility of ensuring that environmental standards are met if there's an environmental complaint?
Through you, Chair, yes.
And that's an officer paid for by the Hobart City Council?
Through you, Chair, yes.
Okay.
That's
Can I answer your question?
No, well,
let's keep debate through the chair. Let's let this meeting continue in order.
Now I'll go on to I'll go on to another couple of questions.
Yeah.
My next question is: did the Hobart City Council receive one or various complaints in regards to an environmental nuisance at this address?
Through you, Chair, yes.
Did the council officers and compliance officer pursue that? And that's why we're here with this application. Okay. Now, and the last question is, and I'm sorry about this, did the person who did the report predict the report, or was it the professional that a council officer that actually did the report?
Through you, Chair, which report?
Is this a predicted report by a layperson, or is this a report by a professional that the council report is?
I think that's reaching into
I
apologise.
Look, I don't want to go down to whether I got one question or two or three. Definitely, there's been a detrimental impact on the neighbours. Councillor Dudder is absolutely correct on his first point. Not a problem. We can't argue that. We're here because of the detrimental impact on the neighbours. I don't take on board that anyone around this table has any qualifications other than our own assumptions. Irrespective of how many restaurants I've had, I am not a professional in environmental noise and fans and whatever have you, even though I've got a good understanding of them as well. A professional does that. A professional wrote this report, didn't predict the report, didn't predict the outcomes. What we have to do here is find a solution to the problem. We have a problem. We have a noise problem. We have professional consultants that are working on this to find the solution. This is the process of getting to the solution. Considering the Lord Mayor had a op-ed on processes, well, this is what we're doing here. We're going through a process. The process here is, you're the bad person over here creating the noise. You have to fix the problem. Come in the consultants. These are what we're suggesting is going to fix the problem. Okay, give the people, the bad people over here, the opportunity to fix the problem, and then our own person who we pay to ensure that environmental noise standards are met will go on site if there's another complaint because it's not meeting it. And whether or not it's an independent person that we have to get in or not, and the director can make that call to ensure that the standards that have been set and provided to us by the bad person over here are met. Now, until such time we get to that point, we can refuse this all we want. All we're going to be doing then is going from a refusal here to the tribunal over there, where we have to then go and get external consultants to do the officer work, because they can't represent us at the tribunal. Ratepayer costs. Who's going to win? Lawyers. I urge the council to give this an opportunity to, for the consultants of the bad person to find a solution, the council officers to ensure that the environmental noise impacts are met. And that's what the name of the game is. I foresee that if it does go to the tribunal will probably go down the same path in saying, okay, you've got to meet these standards. What have you got in place to meet these standards? The only proof in the pudding will be if they implement the standards and that they're not met. Because the tribunal, there might be another expert on the other side saying they cannot meet these standards. Well, there's going to be two professionals arguing the point. The only way you can test it out is in actual it happening on site. So look, if we want to push the council down the tribunal, do so. Why it's got to 9 months, I don't know, but I believe that's a process of a complaint. Then our council officers talking to the complainant. You've got a problem, them trying to find the problem, and it's taken so long. Let's fix the problem. Let's not push the problem further down the track, because if we approve it today, it'll be on the process of getting it fixed, not another 3 to 6 months of a tribunal process. I'll rest my case. Thank you.
Before I go to...
I just got off a plane from overseas.
Before I go to whoever's speaking next, as much as I agree with the points made by Alderman Zurko, I might ask that we refer to the applicant as the applicant, not the bad person.
Oh, look, I sincerely apologise to the applicant for calling him the bad person.
Who was next? I think I've lost track of speakers. Councillor Sherlock.
Yeah, sorry, just a few questions just with regards to what has been stated. Did we pay to ensure that planning requirements were met when this initial permit came to us without the fans?
Sorry, would you...
Did we pay our own planning staff to ensure that that particular permit complied with requirements for that place? Yes, we did. Okay, great, thank you. And then did we pay compliance officers, was it to go and check that particular permit actually was compliant with noise requirements?
Yes, we pay our compliance staff.
Okay, great, thank you. And then did our compliance staff find any issues at all with the current problems that we have?
Through you, Chair, yes, they did.
They did, okay, great. So there's a few problems there already that our council staff have found, so that's good to hear, thank you. And then with regards to what Councillor Kelly was saying, can we actually condition that? Can we condition, as a planning authority, an independent consultant to come in and verify exactly what Councillor Kelly is requesting?
Through you, Chair, yes, we can. We can require that the thing that we think is going to happen has indeed happened.
Okay, and how do we word that within a condition that we want to approve? If we're going to approve it, do we have to be specific about that?
Through you, Chair, yes, we have been specific. The condition is ENVHES1. It talks about decibels and times and a report confirming.
Sorry, I was referring to what Councillor Kelly, his condition.
We are talking, that's what we talked about.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's already in there, Councillor Kelly, the condition that you wanted?
Sorry, just for clarity, Councillor Sherlock, the condition that's included in the agenda is that testing must be undertaken by a suitably qualified person. But Councillor Kelly was asking that it be taken by an independent someone, not a client of the applicant. That's what the amendment would be.
So that's what I'm saying. Is it possible then to change that wording to say an external consultant? Because I think that's what he would like.
Chair, it's not uncommon for conditions to be worded in a way so that things are submitted and approved by the council, and that amendment could be made. Just
to perhaps assist, would it be cleaner, potentially cleaner or neater, if such testing was to be performed by a council officer rather than talking about third party? Is that possible? I suppose it's a bit. I don't want to engage you in debate, but it is possible for that to occur. Councillor Basalt.
Thank you, Chair. I'm inclined to support the motion before us for refusal. The neighbours have had obviously this difficulty over the last 9 months, and one of the key things that grabbed my attention was that the neighbour across the road had put in a noise complaint. I think that some of the points that were made about decibels being the standard for which we're assessing, not being a complete standard in the sense that different frequencies penetrate different materials in different manners. And because we're measuring the decibels at the boundary rather than within the property, which in this case the property is very, very close to the boundary. So while the decibel reading may be satisfactory, there's an assumption within the guidelines that the materials of a property will further dampen the decibels down. But for low frequencies, we know that they do penetrate walls better. And in light of the failure to put this through the planning process properly in the first instance, when in fact we've been wedged into a position where there's a air handling unit that's been located in a particular spot, and had we had all the information at the time, we may never have allowed that to happen, really goes back to the onus being on the applicant to have done the proper job in the first instance. I don't, like, this is caused nuisance, and this is loss of residential amenity in a residential zone to a family, and I don't see in this instance why I should allow a retrospective planning approval that may or may not solve the deleterious effects in which the neighbours are experiencing, when it should have been done in the first instance. So I think, with hesitancy, I think I will support Councillor Dutter's motion for refusal on those grounds.
Okay, who's next? No, look, I wouldn't be supporting the motion in front of us. I'd be more minded to support what's been foreshadowed. I think for the reasons Alderman Zuko said, I think at the end of the day, when it comes to things, we do have an applicant saying one thing, we've got representatives saying something. I think this is something that we need to take as per the wording of the planning scheme, and I think we need to look at those objective markers like decibels. I understand they might not be the most perfect measure, but they're the measure that we have. And with the condition that those decibels are met, I think it avoids any speculation that standards will be met or not met, or can they be met or can they not be met. I think if we place on there that the permit's only issued if such a standard is actually achieved, I think that goes a long way to avoiding the speculation or uncertainty about whether or not those standards will be met. So for that reason, I won't be supporting the refusal. I'd be more minded to support what's been suggested and foreshadowed by Councillor Kelly. If there's no other comment or debate, I'll put the motion for refusal moved by Councillor Dutta. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against say no. 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 Show of hands. All those in favour. Against?
Alderman Zuko, Alderman Bloomfield, Councillor Kelly and Alderman Varakis.
Okay, so that's carried. So that item has been refused as obviously the foreshadowed lapses. So we now move on to other items. We've finished the items with deputations. Do members want a comfort break?
I get through this very quickly if we can, Chair.
Very good. Yeah. So the next item is 6.1.2, 98.3 Liverpool Street. Any comment or questions or queries from the floor?
Yeah, look, actually let someone else go first. I've just got to get my question.
Chair, I'm supporting this application tonight. It's a legal application. I know there's been a few representatives put in deputations against it, but I don't see a problem with having this shop in the city in that location. So, you know, I don't think it's going to be outrageous. I think it'll be tastefully decorated, so I'm supportive of it. Thank you.
Any other comment, Deputy?
And I suppose, you know, one of the concerns that I had was what sort of visual impact there might be, that's conditioned as far as the what you can see from the front of the building. Through you to the Director, is there any way that we can condition sandwich boards not to be put out in this area?
They are exempt.
They're exempt
under the planning scheme, so
should
no, not really.
not exist.
Good. Any other comment, questions? Alderman Bloomfield?
Do we have any ability to, I think like what Deputy Lord Mayor suggested, to ensure that no display is kept to some standard? Obviously they'll want to show some of their goods and so forth, but to a point where we're not going to get complaints would be great. But I'm not sure how we would word that, and I'm not sure how much we have the right to do so. I know that there was some...
It says that.
Oh, does it?
Yeah, actually,
Areas containing explicit images,
yeah,
wording,
that is
materials.
already conditioned.
Yeah.
I was good. It's PLN S1 on page 149, if you're curious. Alderman Zerko, did you have a question?
No.
Okay, Councillor Basalt.
I think there's a fair definition of explicit image, but within that condition it says an explicit product. I'm not sure there's actually a definition of what constitutes an explicit product. So can you condition something that has no definition?
Through Chair, we have done our best to propose something that's reasonably enforceable. If I'm happy to take other suggestions about different wording.
It's just a definitional issue that I'm raising within the condition that how do you enforce a condition that doesn't have a definition?
In the eye of the beholder.
Well, exactly. That goes to the true issue of a shop such as this, that it is entirely subjective, other than when there's an R18 kind of explicit criteria, which is what we would apply to literature, for example.
We're going to lose a quorum if we don't make decisions soon, Chair.
The item in front of us and it needs to be debated.
People are leaving, so.
I think it's broad enough to give our enforcement officers the ability to have discussions with the shop owners about what is and isn't appropriate.
And I'll just give mine a quick look. I think, I think it comes down to the reasonableness test and what a reasonable person would in the lack of any precedence, what a reasonable person would consider explicit products. I think most people know what we're talking about here. Look, I will be supporting this. I think, I know there's some people that have some concerns about this, but at the end of the day, we've got pretty reasonable conditions that restricting away or ameliorating the concerns that some people have. Beyond that, and as long as those conditions, which I think are reasonable, are met, I don't think it's the place of the chamber to curate what businesses are allowed to or not allowed to trade in the city. So as long as these things are done reasonably, I don't think anything that's proposed to be displayed in that window is anything that you wouldn't see walking past bras and things in the mall. So I don't see any reason why this shouldn't be approved. Councillor Dutta.
The motion be put, Chair.
Very good. I'll happily accept that motion. All those in favour for the procedural motion say aye.
Aye.
Against say no.
No.
Hands. All those in favour. And against? That's carried. So I'll put the motion without any further debate. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against say no.
No.
Show of hands.
Hang on.
All those in favour.
No, it was to put the motion.
Oh, okay,
It's just
yes.
another waste
Favour
of time. But
of the
anyway.
application.
Aye.
Show of hands.
Data, Councillor Harvey, Deputy Lord Mayor and Alderman.
And against? That is carried.
Good evening to all.
Good evening. Next one is, if I've got it right, 6.1.4, 19 Hakia Drive, Tolmans Hill.
Chair.
Any question or comment? Councillor Basalt.
Just to clarify, the reason this has come before planning is because it's clearing council-owned bushland to get a fire buffer for a property that has an indoor swimming pool. Is that correct?
Yes, this application is before you.
Is there precedent for us allowing clearing of council-owned bushland for private development?
Chair, yes, there is a policy which applies in this circumstance, which allows for the clearing.
And the final question is how many trees are we talking about loss of as part of this, or what's the square metre? What's the square meterage of council's land that will be cleared?
We've got a quorum still?
Yep.
Yeah.
I thought it was a 15-metre buffer zone.
15 by?
Well, the length of the back of the block.
Well, yeah. How big is it?
Not much.
100 square metres of trees, or what are we talking?
It's a standard procedure to do this, as I understand. It's been done numerous times, and this is a infill block as well. The other blocks are developed.
I'll just refer elected members to page 265 of the agenda, which has a map, and the notation says the area is very small.
Yeah, so no accurate figure and markup on your phone, right?
But I will add that this has been through our fire and biodiversity team,
Yeah,
and
they're
they've
pretty
reviewed the
strict.
application and they're satisfied that this is appropriate in the circumstances.
And it's a regrowth area from the report, and the condition is to have some scrub or low plantings, grasses and so forth.
At the risk of being cheeky, I might just suggest that if out of everybody in this chamber, Councillor Harvey is comfortable with this, I think I'm pretty comfortable with it as well.
Not just because we're hungry.
Was there any further comment on this? I think it was moved by Councillor Harvey as well. Yes. Councillor Loberg.
I'll just make a quick comment. Just looking at the overhead maps, it's clear that the neighbours have provided that fire break themselves with their own property. And I think it's a bit unfortunate that this particular applicant is expecting to clear council bush for that same sort of fire break. However, I won't be voting against it on that basis. I just wanted to make that point.
Any other comment? No? Cool. I'll put that as moved by Councillor Harvey. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Can say no.
No.
Show of hands. All those in favour.
No.
Yeah, that's what he was saying.
You cut down that tree in South Hobart.
It's a weed.
Councillor Kelly, Councillor Dutta, Councillor Harvey, Deputy Lord Mayor, Councillor Baraka, Alderman
Grass is a weed, isn't it?
And against? That's carried. Okay, I think that's it for applications.
Yep. I'll move report 7.1 and 7.2, Chair.
Thank you. Are there any, well, before we move, is there any comment from Mr. Ryken on 7.1?
Thank you, Chair. In the interest of time, I don't have any comments, but if anyone has any questions, I'm happy to take them.
Are there any questions? Councillor Basalt.
Thank you. In light of tonight's discussion about the significant tree species, can we be provided with what other states do to manage?
Oh, this is in regards to the reports.
Oh,
we
sorry.
haven't got
Questions about that.
No, cool. I'll put those reports. All those in favour say aye. Can say no. That's carried. Questions without notice. Councillor Basalt.
Can we be provided with what other states do, and if there's any legislative means by which we can control tree removal through an opt-in system rather than an opt-out, if that makes sense? So I know that, for example, in New South Wales, you can't remove a tree beyond a certain size without planning approval. Rather than us trying to list every tree that we don't want, just make it a standard thing.
Through Chair, I'll take that one on notice.
I do have one myself. This is one I was trying to ask the other week in council. What is council's, or in the context of the 28-day statutory planning timeline. What's the average time it takes for planning applications to be assessed by this council? And then the second question is, if you include stop clock days, what is the average time it takes to assess planning applications in this council? Thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Lohberger.
Just with regards to planned burning, not 100% sure it belongs in this meeting or in the other meeting, but I'll ask it in this place. I just wanted to ask whether repeated burn-offs of wet forest and dry forest, which is pretty much most of the forest type around the city, whether repeatedly burning off makes that vegetation more fire prone or less fire prone.
Might not be one for this committee, we can refer it.
Yeah, I'm happy to get that one on notice.
Any further? Nope. I'll ask somebody move that we close the open, open the close. Thank